Chapter 1210. Oh no, Yi Shiwen is in danger. No one had imagined that Yi Xing would actually enter the sixth sky of the Transcendence realm. A Yi family expert, who was sitting high up on the platform, revealed a satisfied smile on his face. In his opinion, Yi Shiwen was simply a clown. He could jump all he wanted, but he was just a grasshopper at the end of the autumn. Yi Xing's cultivation of the sixth sky of the Transcendence realm was completely exposed. The results of his special training were also completely displayed. The aura on Yi Xing's body continued to spiral upwards. It looked abnormally terrifying. His eyes were fixed on Yi Shiwen, cold and merciless. His body displayed a supreme aura, forming a wave of air that swept out, causing Yi Shiwen's clothes to flutter in the wind. Yi Shiwen didn't move an inch. Even though he felt the change in Yi Xing's aura, his expression didn't change in the slightest. Yi Shiwen, today is the day of your doom. You are fated to die today. Yi Xing sneered at Yi Shiwen. He took a step forward, and the aura on his body became even more tyrannical. It was like a coiling dragon or a crouching tiger. His palms flipped in midair, and countless stars began to flicker in his hands. They formed a huge star that pressed down on Yi Shiwen. Compared to before, the star that Yi Xing had blasted out was several times more tyrannical. It's a pity, Yi Xing. I didn't expect you to have hidden your strength. You are at the sixth sky of the Transcendence realm. If Yi Shui and the others didn't participate in this competition, you would have been able to sweep away everyone. You had a high chance of getting first place, but it's a pity that you met me. Yi Shiwen said faintly. Just as you said, all of this is fate. It's fate that you can only be my stepping stone. You will be suppressed by me forever. Is he crazy? Someone exclaimed when they heard Yi Shiwen's words. Yi Xing had already displayed tyrannical strength that had never been seen before. In previous years, he could be considered a tyrannical expert. Although there was no age limit for the battles during the ancestral worship ceremony, generally speaking, as long as one's age exceeded a certain threshold, they would automatically give up on participating in the ancestral worship ceremony to give the newcomers a chance to shine. Just like Yi Shui and the others, other than being busy and not being able to participate in the competition this time, it was also because he had already become famous and his age was also approaching the warning line. This time, it could be said that he automatically retreated, leaving space for those younger people to stand out. It was the same for their predecessors. It had been passed down from generation to generation, forming a tacit understanding. It wasn't a hard and fast rule, but everyone would abide by it. Otherwise, the newcomers would never be able to make a name for themselves. Of course, people like Yi Xing, Yi Qing, Yi Chun, and Yi Shiwen were different. Although they were quite old, they had never stood out. In other words, they also needed these competitions to make a name for themselves. Therefore, no one would say anything about their participation. Therefore, in the past years, almost all the champions were at the 5th or 6th level of the Transcendence realm. Yi Xing was considered an extremely tyrannical master in the past years. Yi Shiwen actually dared to say that it was a pity that he met him. Is he really crazy? Yi Xing, who was at the 6th level of the Transcendence realm, was much more tyrannical than Jiegu Jinghao. Isn't that so? Is he scared out of his mind? Does he look like a madman? I think at most he has his own trump card. Everyone was talking about it. And Yi Xing, who was opposite Yi Shiwen, was also a little stunned at this time. Yi Shiwen could still have such confidence in the face of such strength, which made him a little puzzled. However, these doubts were immediately suppressed at the bottom of his heart. Any conspiracy or trick was nothing in front of his tyrannical strength. Just when everyone was puzzled, Yi Shiwen moved. A terrifying flaming long blade appeared in his hand and instantly rose up against the wind. Countless flames formed a huge whirlpool above his head, and in this whirlpool, countless flaming blade auras were formed. Tyrant saber cutting the world. After Yi Xing's aura rose wildly, Yi Shiwen's aura also skyrocketed, not to be outdone. Yi Shiwen originally gave them the feeling that he was only at the peak of the 2nd level of the Transcendence realm. Even so, it was already beyond everyone's expectations that he could crush all the way until now. But now, His aura instantly broke through and skyrocketed all the way to the third level of the Transcendence realm. He is also hiding his strength, everyone exclaimed in surprise. At this time, everyone finally knew where Yi Shiwen's confidence came from. It turned out that he was actually hiding his strength. There were no signs at all before. If Yi Xing had not broken into the sixth heaven of the Transcendence realm, there would have been no way to force him to reveal his true strength. Everyone had a feeling that Yi Shiwen was unfathomable. Some people had watched Yi Shiwen fight all the way until now, so the feeling in their hearts was even more unfathomable. It was precisely because they had followed Yi Shiwen all the way until now that they were very clear that Yi Shiwen was like a bottomless pit. No matter what kind of opponent, no matter how strong the opponent was, he was like a terrifying expert with no bottom line at all. No matter how strong the opponent was, they were easily defeated by him. It even gave people the illusion that even if a celestial realm expert came, he could instantly explode with even more tyrannical strength and defeat a celestial realm expert. Although they all knew that this was impossible, as any celestial realm expert could easily crush a group of law manifestation realm experts, Yi Shiwen's calmness and performance left such a feeling in everyone's hearts. In Yi Shiwen's vortex, countless nomological laws danced in it as if it had formed a small world. Flames. This world was formed by flames. It was not only Yi Chun who could slash out a world with a saber. Yi Shiwen could do it too. That was the phenomenon that appeared when he comprehended the wood-burning saber technique to the extreme. Boom! The long flame saber and the big hand entwined with countless stars collided in midair. It was another earth-shattering collision. Compared to just now, the combat power and destructive power of both sides were not as simple as that. It was simply several times more tyrannical. The small world that was originally specially set up for the battle actually began to show signs of collapsing inch by inch. In other words, the strength of the two had begun to approach the bearing capacity of this small world. This kind of artificial small world could not be compared to a naturally formed small world in the end. It was as if two torrents of energy had fiercely collided in midair. Countless energy waves splashed out, and then formed air waves that swept out in all directions. This was a fierce martial arts competition between the two sides. Yi Xing, who was originally very relaxed and even somewhat indifferent, showed a bit of surprise on his face at this time. He did not expect that Yi Xing could still launch such an attack at this time. Originally, he thought that the meteor explosion should have drained the qi in his body. Even if Yi Xing hid his strength, he should not be able to recover so quickly and launch such an attack. However, at this time, there was no time for him to think too much. He could only circulate the qi in his body and frantically transfer it to make the starlight more brilliant to block Yi Shiwen's flame saber aura. It's just a last-ditch struggle. A sneer flashed across Yi Shiwen's mouth. Originally, he did not want to expose his strength. He only wanted to win with the combat power of the fifth sky of the law phase realm. This was because he was very clear that many people in the entire Yi family were very hostile to him. Before he had a way to figure out the details of these people, it was better to keep a trump card. These trump cards seemed inconspicuous, but they might play a key role at a critical moment. However, now that Yi Xing had also entered the sixth sky of the law phase realm, the original plan could not be used at all. It was all for naught. It could only expose the fact that he had reached the combat power of the sixth sky of the law phase realm. Since it had been exposed, there was no taboo. Attack with all your strength and defeat Yi Xing. This time, he would never give up the championship on a silver platter. He was determined to get the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill. He instantly increased the output of his quintessential essence. His quintessential essence was originally much thicker than Yi Xing's, and the quintessential essence that erupted was also far above his. Almost in an instant, it completely crushed the big starlight hand. Boom! A loud noise came from the two torrents of energy. The big hand entwined with countless starlight was instantly slashed into nothingness, turning into endless starlight and dissipating in the sky. Yi Shiwen's fiery saber aura did not slow down at all. It continued to slash directly in Yi Xing's direction. Oh no! How can this be? At this time, Yi Xing finally realized that something was wrong. He stomped his feet and began to flee frantically. He turned into a sky full of starlight, trying to escape. "Where do you think you're going?" Yi Shiwen shouted coldly. The fiery saber aura was even faster than him. In an instant, it had already caught up with Yi Xing. Bang! An extremely loud crash sounded. Yi Xing was directly slashed by the fiery saber aura. A huge crack appeared on his back, almost cutting his whole body in half. His whole body almost disintegrated. What inner armor! What body protection Jinyuan! Everything was instantly destroyed by Yi Shiwen's blazing saber chi. It was precisely because of these obstacles that he was finally able to preserve his life and not be cut in half by Yi Shiwen on the spot. This was because Yi Shiwen had no intention of holding back at all. If it were Yi Xing, Yi Shiwen would not have held back at all. In fact, he would have been eager to kill Yi Shiwen on the spot. Even so, Yi Shiwen's body was almost split open. He directly slammed into the ground, directly creating a huge pit. Chapter 12:11. What? A big shot of the Yi clan suddenly jumped up from the high seat of the cloud platform. He was dumbfounded as he looked at the scene in front of him. He didn't expect to see such a scene. He was the one who had personally brought Yi Xing into the secret realm to cultivate. Just as the rumors in the outside world said, Yi Xing was his illegitimate son. Furthermore, he was the most talented one among his many children. He had the highest chance of taking over his position in the future. Therefore, he spared no effort to cultivate him. Perhaps many of his children would be dissatisfied, but it didn't matter. They wouldn't dare to overturn the heavens in front of him. Whether it was an illegitimate child or a legitimate child, in his eyes, they were all his descendants. There was no difference at all. This time, he made Yi Xing return in a high-profile manner. He even passed the trial of the Martial Essence Tower. He wanted to make Yi Xing famous in one fell swoop. He wanted to find a suitable reason for his next step of cultivation. If he didn't have a good reason, he could only use his own resources to nurture Yi Xing. However, the situation was different now that Yi Xing had passed the 6th level of the Martial Refinement Tower. He had become the prodigy of the entire Yi clan. In that case, he could openly use the Yi clan's resources to nurture his successor. Who would have thought that this wishful thinking would be good? Unfortunately, God's plans were not as good as Yi Fan's. First, Yi Fan had passed through the 7th floor. Then, Yi Shiwen had easily passed through the 8th floor. Both of them had broken all the records. The dazzling brilliance of these two people had made Yi Xing's brilliance dim by a lot. Originally, he wanted to use this to make a name for the Yi clan. Now, it seemed like he was making a wedding dress for Yi Shiwen and Yi Fan. Fortunately, the basic goal had been achieved. He had enough reason to mobilize the Yi clan's resources to cultivate Yi Xing. Even those old guys who didn't like him couldn't find fault in this matter. This was also the Yi clan's usual practice. Whether it was the main clan or the branch clan, as long as a genius could pass the 5th floor of the Martial Essence Tower, they would be cultivated with all their strength. Only in this way could the Yi clan be guaranteed to have a steady stream of geniuses and ensure the Yi clan's long-term prosperity. No one could tamper with this matter because it was related to the prosperity of the Yi clan for generations to come. Therefore, Yi Shiwen's slow reaction was already the limit for the Yi clan. As for letting those old fellows who only cared about the Yi clan watch helplessly as the forces hostile to Yi Shiwen strangled Yi Shiwen to death, it was simply impossible for them to do so. This was simply going against the heavens. Not to mention that Yi Shiwen had also broken through the 8th layer. Among the younger generation of this generation, it was very rare to see someone who could break through the 8th layer. Not to mention, he had done so with such outstanding results. So, it was impossible for everyone to ignore his existence. Fortunately, he achieved his goal in the end. Yi Xing received sufficient resources to train him, and Yi Xing did not disappoint him. In just a short span of 3 months, he had already entered the 6th level of the Transcendence Realm. Originally, he thought that the champion was almost certain. Therefore, he did not hesitate to mobilize his forces in the Yi clan to create momentum and get the clan master to agree to award the 9 revolutions, Taishin Golden Pill, to the champion of this competition. For this, he also paid a great price to create such momentum. By the time Yi Xing obtained the 9 revolutions Taishin golden pill, with more cultivation, it was almost certain that he would enter the heaven realm. It should be known that even in the Yi clan, there were many factions, and in each faction, the Transcendence realm was the backbone, but only the heaven realm was the true pillar. If a faction did not even have a heaven realm expert, it would have no influence in the upper echelons, not to mention being able to guarantee its own interests. And only after Yi Xing entered the heaven realm could he arrange for Yi Xing to take over his position. Then, he could also free himself from the trivial matters and cultivate in peace to seek longevity. These things were all calculated long ago, and every step was within his expectations. Only Yi Shiwen was a complete surprise. He had never thought that there would be a variable and freak like Yi Shiwen. First, he messed up his plan to make Yi Xing famous in the Yi clan. Then, he directly crippled Yi Xing in the competition, directly interrupting his path to winning the championship. Although the finals had not yet begun, in his opinion, if even Yi Xing was not a match for Yi Shiwen, who else could be a match for him? This meant that the champion was almost determined. Thinking of this, he could not help but have some thoughts in his mind, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. This was really Zhou Lang's ingenious plan to bring peace to the world, but he suffered a double loss. All his calculations seemed so ridiculous at this time, which was equivalent to making a wedding dress for Yi Shiwen. Thinking of how much he had paid to get the clan master to agree to award the 9 revolutions Taishin golden pill to this year's champion, he really had the urge to spit out a mouthful of blood at this time. Big loss, big loss. He was so depressed that he was about to die. Spit out blood. I'm really going to spit out blood. He had never suffered such a big loss before, and no one had ever been able to see through his calculations so cleanly. His gaze was like that of a ferocious beast that was about to devour someone. On the other side of his gaze was Yi Shiwen, who had defeated Yi Xing. Many of the big shots of the Yi clan around him wanted to laugh when they saw his defeated appearance, especially those big shots of the Yi clan who did not get along with him at all. At this time, they were even more delighted. Yi Qian, to think that you would have such a day. Ha ha ha. She looked at Yi Shiwen with a much friendlier gaze. Well, this little guy is really pleasing to the eye. Yi Shiwen's figure floated above Yi Xing, and once again confirmed that this time, Yi Xing had really been beaten to the ground by him, and there was no chance for him to fight back. Let's see if you can still make a comeback this time. Yi Shiwen sneered. Yi Xing was indeed a talent, and he was able to make another breakthrough in a short period of time. Although a lot of resources were tilted towards him, Yi Shiwen did not deny his talent. He could only say that it was a pity that he had met Yi Shiwen, and he still had to go against him. Whoosh! A white light flashed, and Yi Xing was directly teleported out. This battle, Yi Shiwen won. Everyone was shocked. There was silence. Perhaps it wouldn't be surprising if either Yi Xing or Yi Shiwen emerged victorious in the end. After all, this was a very normal thing to do. Both of them were originally the favorites to win the championship, so it would not be surprising if either one of them won. However, what really surprised everyone was the process of the battle. They thought that Yi Xing, who was extremely powerful and could easily defeat any opponent, would be in a tit-for-tat battle when he faced Yi Shiwen. It would not be surprising if the battle was earth-shattering, but who knew that Yi Xing would be completely suppressed by Yi Shiwen with an absolute advantage as soon as he made his move. Yi Shiwen's sudden attack almost disintegrated his body on the spot. This was already unexpected enough. No one thought that this would be the result. However, what was even more surprising was that Yi Xing erupted with the terrifying strength of the 6th level of the Transcendence realm. Just when everyone thought that Yi Shiwen would not be able to escape this time, Yi Shiwen also erupted with even more tyrannical strength. Even though Yi Xing erupted with the strength of the 6th level of the Transcendence realm, he was still unable to withstand a single blow from Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen only needed one slash to completely injure him. Originally, everyone thought that there would be a fierce battle, but now it seemed that it was simply a joke. Yi Xing did not even have the strength to fight back against Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen almost directly advanced to the finals with his undisputed strength. At this time, Yi Shiwen, who was outside, planned to pay attention to his opponents in the finals. Apart from Yi Xing, these two people were not ordinary either. After all, to be able to stand out among the millions of elites of the younger generation, they naturally would not be simple. It was just that previously, Yi Shiwen's attention was basically on Yi Xing. Although he was confident that Yi Xing was definitely not his opponent, he did not pay too much attention to the others. Among these two young masters, Yi Shi was the successor of another secret inheritance in the Yi family. His journey had been very smooth. Similar to Yi Shiwen and Yi Xing, he directly swept through the opponents, and no one could cause any trouble for him at all. As for the other young man with an ordinary appearance, Yi Shukong, he was a very ordinary disciple of the Yi family. Before this tournament, no one knew what kind of character he was. He was even more of a dark horse than Yi Shiwen. Although Yi Shiwen's time of rise was not very long, and many people might not be very familiar with Yi Shiwen, he had been famous for a few months after all. Among them, there was even a sensational event like crippling Jiagu Jinghao. So although Yi Shiwen's time of fame was very short, in terms of fame, he did not lose to Yi Xing, who was already famous before returning to the Yi family. On the other hand, Yi Shukong had no reputation at all. In fact, there weren't many people who could call out his name before this. However, in this battle, he had shocked the world with a single brilliant feat. He was a dark horse that couldn't be any darker. Previously, no one had heard of any outstanding achievements from him, but in the battle, he could easily take down those elites who had been famous for many years. Even if this Yi Shi came from a hidden sect with an ancient inheritance, and his cultivation had even entered the peak of the 5th level of the law manifestation realm, when facing Yi Shukong, he was simply unable to fight back. In fact, it was even more serious than when Yi Xing faced Yi Shiwen. No matter how Yi Shi resisted, when facing Yi Shukong, he was completely not an opponent at all. It was like a child facing an adult, unable to fight back. Chapter 12:12. What a great Yi Shukong! Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and watched as Yi Shi was defeated by Yi Sukong. Yi Shi didn't even have the strength to fight back against Yi Sukong. Yi Shukong's swordsmanship was close to the Tao. Every strike contained great power. Yi Shi's cultivation was not shallow, and the source of his martial arts was not ordinary. However, when facing Yi Shukong, he was still at a disadvantage. It was just like when Yi Xing faced Yi Shiwen. It was the same. He was at a disadvantage in every aspect and was completely suppressed. It was even easier than when Yi Shiwen defeated Yi Xing. No matter what, Yi Xing had already stepped into the 6th sky of the Transcendence Realm, while Yi Shi was only at the 5th sky of the Transcendence Realm. This Yi Shukong is probably already at the 6th sky of the Transcendence Realm, Yi Shiwen said with a slightly serious expression. This Yi Shukong was much stronger than he had imagined. Originally, he thought that after defeating Yi Xing, he had already swept away the biggest obstacle to winning the championship. However, now it seemed that the real enemy was Yi Shukong, not Yi Xing. Compared to the strength that Yi Shukong displayed, Yi Xing seemed to be much weaker. Not only was Yi Shiwen amazed, but the spectators were also amazed. They originally thought that Yi Shiwen and Yi Xing's combat power of the 6th sky of the Transcendence Realm was already amazing enough. They did not expect Yi Shukong to be even more amazing. And most importantly, many people thought that Yi Shiwen would win the championship without a doubt. After defeating Yi Xing, the favorite to win the championship, there was almost no doubt that he would win the championship. However, the result was not like this. Yi Shukong also had the potential to win the championship. Yi Shi, who was also at the peak of the 5th sky of the Transcendence Realm, could not fight back at all in front of Yi Shukong. Many people guessed that Yi Shukong had most likely entered the 6th sky of the Transcendence Realm. Although with Yi Xing as an example, everyone knew that even if Yi Shukong entered the 6th sky of the Transcendence Realm, it might not be enough in front of Yi Shiwen. After all, it was different from when Yi Shiwen defeated Yi Xing and became the champion. For Yi Shiwen, there was still a huge threat. In other words, the championship battle had begun to become suspenseful again. I never expected that this unknown Yi Shukong would actually be so formidable. I'm afraid he isn't the slightest bit inferior to Yi Shui and the others. It's true that quite a few geniuses like this that no one usually notices will appear in every competition, and they'll amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. The more geniuses there are, the more powerful our Yi clan will be. This is a good thing, At this time, Yi Shukong's attack had also reached the end. Yi Shukong shouted coldly and loudly, "Let's stop here." He swung his sword, and the endless sword radiance instantly swept into a terrifying storm, surrounding him and forming a huge storm, instantly sweeping up. One sword to break all techniques. Originally, he was able to completely suppress Yi Shi just by relying on his sword skills. Now, he even used his tyrannical strength. He seemed to know that his strength had already been guessed by others, and there was no point in keeping it a secret. He finally no longer chose to keep it a secret and used his tyrannical strength. Boom! A stream of sword chi instantly slashed down, completely crushing Yi Shi's attack in an instant. It directly broke through all the attacks on his body. One slash, just one slash. Yi Shi was blasted away by the sword chi on the spot, and he was almost cut into two by this sword chi. He directly turned into a mass of white light and was teleported away. Seeing this scene, everyone could not help but gasp. The strength of this Yi Shukong was stronger than they had imagined, and there were even signs of him being able to challenge Yi Shiwen. And high up in the sky, in the depths of the cloud platform, the big shot of the Yi clan, Yi Qian, stared coldly at the two people on the field at this time. First, there was Yi Shiwen, and now there was Yi Shukong. These two people were absolutely amazing. Even if Yi Xing could escape from Yi Shiwen, he was afraid that he would not be Yi Shukong's opponent next. He saw very clearly. After all, he had already entered the celestial realm, and he had a clear view of these battles in the law manifestation realm. Nothing could hide from him. He could not help but feel bitter in his heart. Yi Xing was cultivated by him with all his might. Although he was known as an illegitimate child, many people knew the inside story. When Yi Xing was still outside the Yi clan, he secretly supported and cultivated Yi Xing with all kinds of resources. The various benefits he enjoyed were not inferior to those of those geniuses at all. But now, after returning to this place, they had been completely defeated. First, it was Yi Shiwen, and now it was Yi Shukong. Both of them were amazing geniuses who could reach this step without any cultivation from their families. Compared to them, Yi Xing, who was originally a Heaven's Pride expert, had become unusually dim. This was not a big deal. The key was that he had spent so much effort, but in the end, the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Elixir was going to be a gift to someone else. How could he accept this? No, this was absolutely unacceptable. He had to find a way to prevent this from happening. His eyes were full of coldness and a bit of killing intent as he looked at the two people below the stage. Yi Shiwen watched Yi Shukong easily defeat Yi Shi, and he secretly became vigilant. This was indeed a powerful opponent, even more tyrannical than Yi Xing from before. Yi Shukong stepped out of the arena. At this time, only Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong were left in the arena. As if sensing Yi Shiwen's gaze, Yi Shukong turned his gaze over. It was a pair of deep and calm eyes, as if nothing in this world could attract his attention. It was as if stars in the universe were born and destroyed in his eyes, deep and terrifying. Yi Shiwen also read the fighting intent in his eyes, which was burning with fighting intent. After sensing his fighting intent, the fighting intent in Yi Shiwen's body also began to burn fiercely. This was a feeling that could only be felt when facing a tyrannical opponent. Everyone's eyes were focused on the two. The two amazing geniuses who were not in the public sight before were now finally going to collide. Big brother, this Yi Shukong is so powerful. Will second brother be fine? Among the crowd, Yi Qiao looked at Yi Shiwen with some worry and asked. Originally, everyone thought that Yi Shiwen would have no problem winning the championship, but they did not expect that a dark horse like Yi Shukong would appear and suddenly disrupt everyone's rhythm. It's okay. You have to have confidence in brother Wen, Yi Mao said with a smile. Although he was also very afraid of Yi Shukong's strength, and compared to Yi Kai and Yi Qiao, who were only half-step into the law manifestation realm, he was in the law manifestation realm, so he could see more clearly. He knew that the horror of Yi Shukong was far beyond what they knew, but so was Yi Shiwen. After hearing Yi Mao's words, Yi Kai and Yi Qiao did not think much about it. After so many rounds, watching Yi Shiwen defeat almost all of his opponents like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, they had a kind of blind trust in Yi Shiwen. As long as Yi Shiwen was on the field, there was no enemy that he could not defeat. Yi Xing was strong enough before, but in the end, he was directly destroyed by Yi Shiwen in 2 moves. Looking at Yi Shiwen, although there was a somewhat dignified expression on his face, there was no panic. This was the performance of a person who was wise. Indeed, Yi Shiwen was indeed wise. No matter how strong Yi Shukong was, it did not matter to him at all. Yi Shiwen, come and fight. As long as you defeat me, even if the reward for second place is given to you, so what? Yi Shukong looked at Yi Shiwen and said confidently, not caring about the reward given by the Yi family. You really don't care? Yi Shiwen said with some surprise. One must know that the reward given by the Yi family was very generous, even if it was only for second place. Even he was a little tempted, but Yi Shukong was not tempted at all. Without the 9 revolutions Taishin golden pill, everything else is not worthy of my attention, Yi Shukong said indifferently. My Tao lies only in myself. All external forces are fleeting clouds. I don't care about anything except for the 9 revolutions Taishin golden pill. Aren't you the same? I heard that you are also a descendant of the Yi family and have not received any benefits from the Yi family at all. I don't believe that you really care about this kind of thing. Yi Shukong was like an ancient ascetic. He firmly believed that his own body was the origin of everything. In his opinion, no matter what kind of external support, it would interfere with his Tao. Although many people thought that these ascetics were stupid, no one dared to deny the strength of the ascetics. This was because they were able to endure all kinds of difficult conditions. In their eyes, it was natural for them to be strong. Hearing Yi Shukong's words, the expressions of many big shots of the Yi family in the depths of the cloud platform changed slightly. What they were most afraid of was encountering such geniuses who did not rely on the Yi family at all. For example, no matter how powerful Yi Shui, Yi Xing, and the others were, for the Yi family, there were only benefits and no disadvantages. Because everything they had was given by the Yi family. Without the Yi family, they would not be where they were today. The Yi family could give them everything, and naturally, they could take back everything that was given to them. Therefore, they did not care about these things at all. Everything was under their control. They used to be like this too. Generation after generation, they developed the Yi family. However, Yi Shukong, Yi Shiwen, and the others were on the other extreme. They did not rely on any help from the Yi family to cultivate to such an extent. Since they did not enjoy any benefits from the Yi family, how could they have any sense of belonging to the Yi family? This was a very real problem. Since they did not have a sense of belonging, there was naturally no way to ask them to do anything for the Yi family. All efforts and returns were relative. These big shots of the Yi family were in charge of the Yi family. Naturally, they would not be stupid enough to think that everyone in the Yi family would contribute unconditionally to the Yi family. Whatever they wanted in return, they would have to pay the price. Chapter 12:13. No one could just enjoy the rewards without paying the price. If the Yi clan wanted many geniuses to fight for it, dedicate themselves to it, and contribute to it, then it had to treat these geniuses well. This was also the reason why the Yi clan treated these geniuses so well. Only when these geniuses felt that there were enough benefits would these geniuses be loyal to the Yi clan, just like the Yi clan itself. However, in the face of people like Yi Shukong, there was nothing they could do. The reason was also very simple. Yi Shukong did not receive any benefits from the Yi clan, so what right did he have to ask him to fight for the Yi clan? This was an issue of equality. If it was an ordinary person, they would not think so much, but in the face of a top genius who might be able to step into the celestial realm in the future, it was never too much to be careful. The best way was to use time to slowly make up for this part of the gap. What the Yi clan did not give him before, he would double it. After all, he had grown up in the Yi clan. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He had grown up outside the clan and had nothing to do with the Yi clan. Moreover, After returning to the Yi clan, he had been obstructed by some people. Even though he had displayed the strength of a top Heaven's Pride expert, he had not been able to enjoy the corresponding treatment. How could he not feel resentment? After seeing the talent and strength displayed by Yi Shiwen, some of the big shots of the Yi clan who were originally neutral also began to slightly regret at this time. Was it wrong to do this? If such a genius could not be accepted into the Yi clan, should they push him to the opposite side? I'm different from you, Yi Shiwen insipidly said. Perhaps these things from outside the province will hinder your cultivation for you. However, I can transform any external help into my own strength and quickly improve myself. These rewards may not be enough to make me work for them. But why wouldn't I accept them since they have delivered themselves to my doorstep? You are right. The two of them were like two completely different paths. For Yi Shukong, he was the only one, and any other assistance would become an obstacle on his path of cultivation. This path was very arduous, and it was even more difficult for him than for others. On the other hand, Yi Shiwen was making use of all the available conditions to quickly strengthen himself. He had the mysterious space to make deductions for him, so he wouldn't make the slightest mistake. Moreover, he had Yi Mo, an experienced and circumspect old guy, to help him at any time, so he didn't have to worry about any problems. The Daos of the two were completely different, but they had converged here today. Sure enough, these outsiders are all ambitious wolves. No matter how many resources we give them to train, they won't show any gratitude at all, let alone submit to us. Some people reflected on whether or not they should increase their support for Yi Shiwen. However, there were also some people who spoke nonsense at this time. Some of them were hostile to Yi Shiwen, while some of them were well-known old fogies of the Yi family who believed in the theory of bloodline. They were often stubborn elders of the main family. They were born in the most prominent main bloodlines of the Yi family and had always recognized those who grew up in the Yi family. As for those who wandered outside, even if they were geniuses, there was no value in cultivating them. Because they grew up outside, the recognition of the Yi family was very low, and there was no value in cultivating them at all. This was incompatible with the policy of cultivating geniuses at all costs held by the vast majority of people. For many years, the Yi family had also relied on an inclusive attitude towards all geniuses of the Yi family's bloodline to gain the loyalty of countless geniuses. Therefore, the Yi family could prosper until now. This was a principle recognized by the vast majority of people. However, there were still some people who were dismissive of this and supported the theory of bloodline. For the Yi family, they were the most extreme right-wingers, and their power could not be underestimated. However, I also want the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill. Yi Shiwen's words were sonorous and powerful, and he said resolutely. He did not know that the big shots of the Yi family in the depths of the cloud platform were making a ruckus because of Lien Rongan's matter. Two completely different ideas were colliding. I also won the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill. As long as you can defeat me, the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill is yours, Yi Shukong said after a moment of silence. This was obviously a huge training for him. Yi Shiwen's expression became dignified. Soon, a bell sound came from the depths of the space and floated out. The two glanced at each other and directly stepped into the world used for the battle. Yi Shiwen, it's not too late for you to regret it now. If I go all out, I'm afraid even I can't control it. Yi Shukong glanced at Yi Shiwen and said. He was a little conceited, but he did have the capital to be conceited. Even Yi Shiwen was nothing in his eyes. I know you defeated Yi Xing before, so you should be very proud of yourself. However, if you know my past achievements, you won't think so. There was once an old antique at the 6th level of the Law Manifestation Realm who wanted to plot against me, but he was seriously injured on the spot by my sword and fled. Yi Shukong looked at Yi Shiwen and said with an unusually sincere expression. At this time, countless people in the audience cried out in surprise. Antiques at the 6th level of the Transcendence Realm were presumably very old. Perhaps they didn't have enough potential and couldn't advance any further. But if one looked down on them because of that, it would be a big mistake. Because there was not much room for improvement in their cultivation, Many of them put their energy on the cultivation of martial arts. After hundreds and thousands of years of cultivation, their strength was terrifying to an unimaginable level. Even geniuses of the same level would have a headache when they encountered these people because they had lived for too long. To some extent, living for a long time was a huge asset in itself. Geniuses had to avoid these people, but Yi Shukong actually seriously injured an antique at the 6th level of the law manifestation realm with one sword strike. It seemed that in terms of combat power, he might be above Yi Shiwen. At this time, the balance in everyone's hearts could not help but tilt towards Yi Shukong. Originally, they only thought that Yi Shukong might pose a huge threat to Yi Shiwen, but now it seemed that it was not just a threat. It should be an unusually evenly matched battle. Don't say these words. If you have the confidence to defeat me, do you need to say these words to make me take the initiative to retreat? Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Yes, he saw through it at a glance. This was Yi Shukong's psychological strategy. He looked sincere, but in fact, he wanted to break through Yi Shiwen's line of defense. If an ordinary person did not have a firm enough heart, he was afraid that it would be very easy to be affected. At that time, he would lose without a fight. This was the reason. When experts fought, there was no room for the slightest flaw, even if it was only a flaw in the mind. If there was no certainty of victory, then it was very easy for others to take advantage of it. He wanted to use psychological strategy. Naturally, he would not expect Yi Shiwen to give up the championship so easily under such circumstances. But even if it was just to shake Yi Shiwen's heart, it would be worth it. This Yi Shukong was not an ordinary person. He was not a person who stuck to formalities, and his combat talent was very high. Yi Shiwen almost instantly came to such a judgment, but there was also an unexpected gain. In fact, Yi Shukong was not so confident. Otherwise, why would he come up with such a strategy? If he really had the confidence to completely defeat Yi Shiwen, then he should not have done this. Of course, it was not that he had no confidence at all, but he did not have the confidence to completely defeat Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen is indeed Yi Shiwen. Yi Shukong did not deny it and laughed. In his heart, he was also a little surprised that Yi Shiwen could see through his strategy at a glance. Although his strategy was simple, in fact, because of its simplicity, it was not easy to guard against. Many talented people often fell into a trap. Only people with extremely rich combat experience and always vigilant could see through his strategy in the first place. It seemed that Yi Shiwen's experience was not simple. However, he did not take it to heart. These were just insignificant tricks. Even if it really shook Yi Shiwen's heart, in the end, he still had to use his skills to see through it. This is actually a strategy? Some people only came to a sudden realization at this time, but they still looked a little incredulous. They were not on guard at all, but were stunned by the results that Yi Shukong said. They did not expect that there was actually a hidden trap in it. They could not help but feel a cold sweat dripping down their backs. This time, Yi Shukong only said it to Yi Shiwen. In fact, if it was their turn to be set up in a battle, would they be able to see through it in the first place? They were not sure if they could escape. This could be considered as learning a little from a fall into a pit, a gain in your wit. In their hearts, they were even more afraid of Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong. Neither of these two people were ordinary people. These two people are so powerful. They have not even started fighting, but they're already playing dirty tricks on each other. They are not simple. Whether this is a trap or not, if what Yi Shukong said is true, then Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong should be able to stage a fierce battle. When two tigers fight, one must be injured. This finals is much more exciting than I thought. I originally thought that Yi Shui and the others would not participate, so it might be a little boring. Now it seems that they are not inferior to them at all. Many masters in the audience seats were excited. The battle between Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong, the two amazing geniuses, was bound to be exciting. It was directly related to who would be the champion and the whereabouts of the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill. In that case, then I will not be polite. Yi Shukong's tone became indifferent. Chapter 12:14. This was a highly anticipated battle. Everyone's eyes were on the two of them. The outcome of the battle would, to a large extent, directly determined the ownership of the 9 revolutions Taishian golden pill. "Let's do it," Yi Shiwen said faintly. He was too lazy to say anything more to him. As he spoke, streams of tyrannical qi boiled out of his body and swept out. The void under his feet collapsed in large areas, forming a complete vacuum zone. It looked exceptionally terrifying. That's for the best. Yi Shukong's tone was excited, and his fighting spirit was boiling. The 9 revolutions Taishian golden pill is destined to be mine. No one can take it away from me. As he spoke, he took a step forward, and an ancient bronze sword with simple patterns appeared in his hand. This was a true display of his strength. It was completely different from when he fought with Yi Shi previously. The aura on his body began to rise continuously. In just a moment, it had climbed to the 6th level of the Transcendence realm, and it was still rising. It finally stopped when it reached the peak of the 6th level of the Transcendence realm. Clang! The ancient bronze sword in his hand made a loud clanging sound, and the sword light instantly tore through the sky as if it was about to shatter the world. In an instant, it broke through the sky, overturned the world, and everything changed. Under the sword, it was as if a river of time was slashed out. No one could resist the power of time. It was completely different from the previous fight. When Yi Shukong fought with Yi Shi just now, he displayed a terrifying swordsmanship technique that was close to the Tao. He almost didn't use any strength, and just used swordsmanship techniques to force Yi Shi to the point where he couldn't fight back. However, when facing Yi Shiwen, he knew that this was impossible. Yi Shiwen was not Yi Shi in essence. It should be said that Yi Shiwen's existence was 10 times, or even 100 times more terrifying than Yi Shi. Yi Shiwen had abandoned all fancy moves in this sword attack. Instead, he had integrated all of his martial arts understanding into this sword attack and chopped down from the sky. It was very similar to the sword attack that Yi Shiwen had used to defeat Yi Xing. Yi Shiwen had poured all of his power into this sword attack, and had done it once and for all. At this time, Yi Shiwen finally moved. He turned his palm up and grabbed the shape of a dragon's claw, grabbing the sword light. Clang! A loud roar sounded. Yi Shiwen actually blocked the sword. Golden scales appeared on Yi Shiwen's palm, and it was a golden dragon's claw. Great Dragon Capturing Art. Yi Shiwen casually used the Great Capture Dragon power. Compared to 3 months ago, his progress in the Great Capture Dragon power was not small, and it had directly reached the small completion realm. Yi Shiwen directly blocked this sword. However, this sword did not crumble. Instead, it continued to burst out countless sword aura. In an instant, it scattered all over the sky, tearing apart the vast sky. The stars flickered, and the sky was filled with sword light everywhere. The two sides were in a deadlock in midair. Although Yi Shiwen's Great Capture Dragon power had not yet reached the Desheng level, but after all, it had already reached the Xiaoqing level. Moreover, it was a heaven-level martial technique, so its might had reached an unimaginable level. However, he was actually unable to break this sword. Yi Shukong was also a little stunned. He knew the power of this sword very well. Even an ordinary expert at the 6th level of the Transcendence realm would be killed directly. Yi Shiwen was not simple to be able to withstand this sword so easily. Boom! A terrifying force swept out in an instant, and the two of them immediately retreated and separated. This time, both of them seemed to have used all their strength, but they could not do anything to each other. Especially those in the audience seats at this time, they were a little stunned to see the scene in front of them. It was actually a tie. Although the two sides had not fought to the most intense time, it was enough to see how powerful they were to be able to be evenly matched at that time. Especially in the depths of the cloud platform, the Yi family experts looked at Yi Shiwen's Great Capture Dragon power with an unusually complicated expression. How many years has it been? I can't believe I'm seeing the Great Capture Dragon power again. Looking at his eyebrows, it is somewhat similar to Yi Junshin's. The Great Capture Dragon power has actually been practiced to such a level. Amazing! It's almost exactly the same. Such a person coming back from the outside. Is it good or bad for our Yi family? But in addition to Yi Shiwen, more people were more interested in Yi Shukong's sword technique. Because under normal circumstances, if he was not a genius cultivated by his family, it was unlikely for him to learn any extraordinary martial arts. But now it seemed that this sword technique was actually able to contend with the great dragon capture power. It was not simple at all. Both of them were unknown before, and Yi Shiwen was even the bloodline of an outsider. For them, these two people were hiding a big secret. On the field, Yi Shukong did not stop at all. Another sword broke through the sky without leaving any trace at all. In an instant, he had already rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. If he showed the level of his skill nearing Tao in front of Yi Shi, then now in front of Yi Shiwen, he showed the martial arts knowledge of no move is better than having a move. A casual sword seemed to have no skills, but it contained all the skills in this sword. Even if it was skill nearing Tao, there was still the shadow of a move. This kind of no move is better than having a move was the real trouble. Because there were no traces at all, there was no way to calculate all kinds of subtleties. And Yi Shiwen's move was a heavy sword without a sharp edge. It was also the embodiment of this kind of no move is better than having a move. He did not stick to the moves at all. In terms of the exquisite understanding of moves, Yi Shiwen, who had the mysterious space, was even more tyrannical than him. In fact, Yi Shiwen's realm was even higher than him. He had reached the point where no move is better than having a move, but Yi Shiwen could freely change whether there was a move or not. He did not stick to the saying of no move or having a move at all. This in itself was a realm higher than him. The battle between the two was like a battle between two martial Tao masters. Although the level of power between the two was not the highest, in terms of martial Tao realm comprehension, they had far surpassed many experts at the 9th level of the Transcendence realm and even half-step celestial realm. This was a genius. Although their strength was still very insufficient, in terms of comprehension, they had reached a very amazing level. And Yi Shiwen did not give way either. He went tit for tat and directly greeted him. Boom! 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 The two sides had fought hundreds of times in an instant, and the fluctuations were more intense than the last. Both sides gradually began to use their full strength, and it was even more terrifying than before. Some experts at the 7th heaven of the Transcendence realm revealed shocked expressions because of their strength. The experts below the 7th heaven of the Transcendence realm were even more shocked. Their juniors felt a chill down their spines. If they encountered either of these two people, they might immediately be defeated. There was no other possibility. The two were like a needle against an awl, facing each other with equal harshness. No matter how much Yi Shukong's strength increased, Yi Shiwen always seemed to be able to block it with ease. Yi Shukong's swordsmanship was sharp, like an antelope hanging its horns. Every sword would appear in places that no one could imagine. But Yi Shiwen was even more powerful. Although he did not counterattack, no matter where Yi Shukong's swordsmanship appeared, he always seemed to be able to detect it in advance and block it in advance. Compared to Yi Shukong, everyone only felt that Yi Shiwen seemed to be more tyrannical. Because the saying that a long defense was bound to be lost, everyone always knew that Yi Shiwen, who was always in a defensive state, would lose sooner or later. But until now, the two sides had fought countless times, and Yi Shiwen had not lost even once. He did not seem to be forced at all. His expression was indifferent, and he looked very relaxed. What they didn't know was that the mysterious space in Yi Shiwen's body was constantly burning spirit crystals, and all kinds of possible deductions were deduced. Yi Shukong's attack seemed like an antelope's horn, but in fact, it was completely under Yi Shiwen's control. In other words, no matter how strong Yi Shukong was, it seemed that he could not escape the deduction of the mysterious space. This kind of deduction was much less than deducing martial arts, and could even be ignored, allowing Yi Shiwen to maintain the upper hand in all aspects. In addition, with the Mingxin ancient tree shrouding his mind, he was always in the best state, and there was no trace of fear at all. Yi Shiwen had been waiting for an opportunity. It was indeed good for a sword cultivator to attack fiercely, but no matter how fierce it was impossible to maintain such an offensive state all the time. This was the so-called the first drum of energy, the second weak, the third exhausted. Everyone could see that although Yi Shiwen was defending, he was not at a disadvantage at all. In fact, he was even using Yi Shukong's swordsmanship to practice his own dragon-catching power. Yi Shiwen had been forcibly breaking through during this time. Although the dragon-catching power was also constantly deducing, overall, the progress was not too obvious. And now in the battle with Yi Shukong, his dragon-catching power was actually faintly improving. Although the degree of improvement was not too much, because Yi Shiwen did not have many spirit crystals on him, and it was impossible to completely rely on the mysterious space to deduce. Now, he had to rely on his own understanding of martial arts to improve his understanding of the dragon-catching power. Now, in everyone's view, the outcome was even more difficult to predict. Whether it was Yi Shukong with his godly swordsmanship or Yi Shiwen with ease, both seemed to have the potential to win the championship. There was no way to accurately judge who would succeed in the end. Today, no matter who wins the championship in the end, the last two will definitely achieve great things in the future. As long as they don't die, it is almost no problem for them to enter the Heaven Realm, especially the one who wins, who will obtain the 9 Revolutions Taishian Golden Pill, will definitely enter the Heaven Realm. Many big shots of the Yi clan in the depths of the Cloud platform thought. But the only pity was that these two were not cultivated by the Yi clan, but grew up on their own, which was somewhat regrettable. Yi Shiwen, your idea is not bad. You actually used me to practice your dragon-catching power? Chapter 12:15. Yi Shiwen, your idea is not bad. You actually used me to practice your great dragon-catching power? Yi Shukong looked at Yi Shiwen coldly and said, as the saying goes, those closely involved can't see clearly. His reaction was a beat slower, but in any case, being used as a whetstone did not make him feel good. You actually recognize the great dragon-catching power? Yi Shiwen was somewhat surprised. Previously, he had also used the great dragon capture power on a whim. However, apart from those big shots of Yi family, the younger generation had almost never recognized the great dragon capture power. So, it was even more difficult for them to recognize it. How can I not know Yi Junshin's famous consummate skill? Yi Shukong said lightly. I didn't expect to be noticed so soon. It's a pity that my great dragon-catching power has not been practiced to the peak. It has not even reached the great accomplishment level. I wanted to use you to push my great dragon-catching power to the next level, but unfortunately, it was all for naught. Yi Shiwen said with a regretful look on his face, but he was actually very satisfied in his heart. Although Yi Shukong had noticed it in a short period of time, Yi Shiwen still had a lot of gains. If he were to practice normally, excluding the mysterious space, it might take him a few months to reach this level. If my great dragon-catching power reaches the great accomplishment level, defeating you will be a piece of cake. Humph, go ahead and try. Although the capture the dragon power is very famous, but even if you have mastered it, you are still no match for me. That was just a warm-up. Yi Shukong looked at Yi Shiwen and said with an unusually cold expression. The swordsmanship in Yi Shukong's hand suddenly burst out with unimaginable light. His body exuded a terrifying fluctuation of qi, as if a terrifying power was boiling in it. He was tall and towering in the void like an ancient demon god. A tyrannical fluctuation swept out from his body in an instant, turning the whole world into a kingdom of swords. Countless sword auras flew, collided with each other, and melted, producing an even more terrifying sword aura. Everyone's expression suddenly changed when they saw this scene. They were all very clear that although Law Manifestation Realm Masters could condense their own domain, there were still differences. Everyone's domain range was different, and not everyone's domain range was the same. Some might be 100 meters, while others might be a few hundred meters. Although this battle arena was only a small world that was specifically used for battles, in reality, a small world was still a small world. No matter how small it was, how small could it be? It would at least be a few thousand kilometers. For a Transcendence realm, to be able to cover a range of 1,000 kilometers was something that only a peak stage Transcendence realm could do. In fact, many peak stage Transcendence realms couldn't even do it. Therefore, one could imagine how shocking this domain was to everyone. Even Yi Shiwen couldn't help but become a little dignified when he saw this domain. Judging from the scope of the domain, one could see how terrifying it was. Although the power of the domain was not necessarily related to the size of the domain, on the contrary, the smaller the domain, the stronger the actual control power, and the stronger the power. However, everything didn't have to be looked at in this way. Being able to cover a range of 1,000 kilometers was enough to prove how powerful Yi Shukong was. In the domain of swordsmanship, Yi Shiwen could almost feel that his body's movements were suddenly controlled. There was no way to move freely at all. Even every wisp of air in this world turned into sword auras to conquer him. In this domain of swordsmanship, Yi Shukong was the real sword god, and everyone had to obey his orders. What a powerful domain! I didn't expect this Yi Shukong to cultivate to such a level without anyone noticing. This domain can actually cover the entire battle arena. And this should not be Yi Shukong's limit, because no one will expand their domain to the extreme when facing an evenly matched opponent. That is equivalent to giving up on suppressing and conquering the opponent. It's really hard to imagine that he is just a kid at the 6th level of Law Manifestation Realm. How can he have such a range of domain? It's really hard to imagine, said a big shot of the Yi family in disbelief. How do we deal with this Yi Shiwen now? Speaking of which, I have never really seen Yi Shiwen's domain. Those people before didn't even have the ability to force his domain out. They are simply trash. These young people nowadays are really more ferocious than the previous one. They are much more ferocious than we were back then. Their future is really boundless. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sigh. If he didn't unleash his real domain, it would really be difficult to compete with him. Yi Shiwen, I also have to admit that you are the most difficult opponent I have encountered so far. Originally, I didn't even bother to compete with Yi Shui, Yi Feng, and the others. If it weren't for the 9 revolutions, Taishian Golden Pill this time, I might not even have appeared. I would have kept quiet. Yi Shukong was just stating the facts lightly. At that time, in front of my swordsmanship domain, everything you have is not worth mentioning at all. Whether it's really not worth mentioning or not, you'll know once you try, Yi Shiwen said with a cold smile. Behind Yi Shiwen, a pair of wings composed entirely of the power of wind and thunder instantly spread out. At the moment when he spread out, the entire sky and earth changed color, filled with the power of wind and thunder. Thunder rumbled, hurricanes attacked, and in an instant, the entire scene changed. The tempest wings behind Yi Shiwen began to flap continuously, and countless power of wind and thunder swept out in an instant. The sword aura that wanted to kill Yi Shiwen was instantly and completely annihilated, unable to get close to Yi Shiwen at all. A domain that only belonged to the power of wind and thunder appeared around Yi Shiwen's body. In this domain, no other elemental laws could survive. Only the power of wind and thunder could exist in it. Although the scope of this domain was not very large, only a mere 500 meters, it looked like a small domain that could only be condensed by someone who had just entered the Law Manifestation Realm, let alone be compared to Yi Shukong's swordsmanship domain that shrouded an area of thousands of miles. However, it was already evident from the fact that none of the sword aura could penetrate into Yi Shiwen's domain of wind and thunder. Yi Shukong's domain was large and broad, while Yi Shiwen's domain was small and refined. In the face of Yi Shiwen's domain, Yi Shukong's expression did not change in the slightest. He only mobilized the swordsmanship domain to completely suppress Yi Shiwen. Immediately afterward, countless sword aura condensed frantically above his head. In a short while, it had condensed into a huge magic sword, blooming with a terrifying light. The light on the blade seemed to be able to tear the sky. This magic sword seemed to be able to completely cut the entire sky. Yi Shiwen's expression suddenly changed. He had already understood Yi Shukong's intention. The battle of domains was just a facade. Yi Shukong did not even think of defeating Yi Shiwen with his domain. Yi Shiwen wanted to use his domain to completely restrain Yi Shiwen and pave the way for his later sword. After figuring this out, Yi Shiwen did not dare to be complacent anymore. No matter how much he knew in his heart, Yi Shukong's sword was definitely able to severely injure a master at the seventh heaven of the law manifestation realm and sweep away all warriors at the sixth heaven of the law manifestation realm. However, the bad thing was that in this swordsmanship domain, almost all the laws were under his control. Yi Shiwen could not dodge at all in this narrow space. Therefore, Yi Shukong clearly knew that it was simply a waste to open such a large domain. He should not have done so, but in fact, he still opened it to keep an eye on Yi Shiwen. Otherwise, Yi Shiwen would not be able to escape from this sword. He actually wants to decide the outcome of this battle with one sword. Such ambition, such determination, Yi Shiwen said with his eyes narrowed. However, at this time it was already too late to dodge. No matter how fast Yi Shiwen was, as long as he could not break the space of this small world, he would not be faster than Yi Shukong's sword aura. He could not dodge at all and could only face it head-on. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the sword light suddenly fell and slashed towards Yi Shiwen. It's too late. Many of the big shots of the Yi family could see that Yi Shukong wanted to decide the outcome of this battle with one sword. He had to first lock Yi Shiwen in place so that he would have time to cast the technique calmly. Just now was the only time that Yi Shiwen could stop him. Unfortunately, Yi Shiwen could not stop him. Now it was simply too late. Although Yi Shiwen had opened up his domain, he could not break Yi Shukong's domain. He could only move within Yi Shukong's domain. Although he was protected by the domain and his movements were not restricted, similarly, as long as he was still within Yi Shukong's domain, this sword was simply unavoidable. They could not help but change their expressions because they realized that if they wanted to avoid this sword, there was no way at all. They could not even escape. More importantly, it was simply too late to face the enemy. And at this time, Yi Shiwen spread out his palm, and countless Zhen Yuan mixed with countless Lingqi and the power of wind and thunder began to condense in his palm. No matter what kind of energy it was, it crazily gathered in his palm, and even those sword ki were absorbed in an instant. And the sword aura was getting brighter and brighter. The sword aura shone on Yi Shiwen's face, making his face look even more indifferent, as if he did not feel that the sword aura was about to hit his body at all. And just when the sword aura was about to hit Yi Shiwen's body and kill him, he opened his mouth and shouted, "Yuan Qi bullet!" A spherical Yuan Qi bullet in his hand spun wildly, and then was instantly thrown out by Yi Shiwen to meet the sword aura. Chapter 12:16. Yuan Qi bullet. The ball-shaped Yuan Qi ball in his hand rotated crazily, and then he instantly threw it out to meet the incoming sword light. Boom! The Yuan Qi bullet and the shocking sword light collided fiercely. Boom! Boom! The dazzling light produced by the explosion instantly covered the entire sky. The sword light and the crazy explosion of the Yuan Qi bullet strangled each other. The space in the entire microcosm began to distort, making it difficult for everyone to see what was going on inside. Only the big shots of the Yi family who saw this scene were shocked and shouted, "How could this be?" After a long time, the smoke and dust dissipated. Everyone only saw that the arena was on the verge of collapsing. All the mountains and rivers had been completely destroyed and turned into a desert. And at this moment, they saw two figures facing each other in midair, both panting heavily. Yi Shiwen, who originally thought that he might have died under Yi Shukong's sword, was still standing intact in the void. There was not a trace of injury on him, but he was constantly panting heavily. On the other side, Yi Shukong was also constantly panting heavily. The sword attack just now had consumed too much of his Zhen Yuan. In addition, in order to prevent Yi Shiwen from escaping, he frantically opened up the domain and enveloped the entire microcosm. Even though he was known as invincible and had far more Zhen Yuan than ordinary people, he still felt a huge and terrifying consumption. His eyes never left Yi Shiwen. He used all his strength in the attack, but he did not expect that it would not be able to kill Yi Shiwen. He did not even manage to injure Yi Shiwen. This was also something he had never expected. He was very clear about the power of that sword attack. Even if he took it head-on, there would only be a dead end. It was impossible for him to survive. But he did not expect that Yi Shiwen would actually take it head-on and come out unscathed. What was that move called? He looked at Yi Shiwen doubtfully. Yuan Qi Bullet. It was such a strange name, yet it possessed such astonishing might. Even his fatal blow was unable to injure him severely. On the other side, Yi Shiwen was also constantly panting. Although the quantity of his real yuan was far more than ordinary people and should be more profound than Yi Shukong's, he was caught off guard by Yi Shukong just now and had no time to prepare any other moves. If he were to fight head-on, even if he had the tyrant body, he would not be able to escape the fate of being seriously injured. That was why Yi Shiwen had chosen the Yuan Qi Ball. As long as he mobilized the Jin Yuan, he could instantly cast this big move. Although the consumption of the Yuan Qi Ball was enormous, but he could still afford to consume about 1/10 of the Jin Yuan. But the real problem was that he simply did not have enough time. The Essence Qi Bullets model was to use a bit of essence energy as a primer to wrap up countless external energies, fuse them together, and then shoot them out. This was the Essence Qi Bullet. However, due to the lack of time, he didn't have enough time to absorb enough external energy to form the Essence Qi Bomb. At this time, he could only choose to increase the amount of quintessential essence input. This one breath consumed more than half of his quintessential essence, making him feel like all the quintessential essence in his body was drained. This feeling, he had not felt this way for a long time. Have to say, he rarely fought in such a situation. Countless fallen leaves swirled in the air, and the gravel, under the inexplicable force, flew up from the ground and flew into the sky. One after another, they shattered. Just this move alone had consumed too much of the Zhen Yuan in his body in one breath. Yi Shiwen, I didn't expect you to be able to dodge this move, Yi Shukong said while panting heavily. There are still a lot of things that you didn't expect. Yi Shiwen grinned and said. He suddenly stomped his feet, and his figure suddenly rushed towards Yi Shukong. Almost in an instant, he pounced in front of Yi Shiwen. After unfolding the devil's wings, Yi Shiwen's speed did not slow down at all. In an instant, he surpassed the limits of his physical body. So fast. How can he be so fast? At this time, many of the big shots in the depths of the cloud platform suddenly changed their expressions. Originally, the battle between the two, whether it was a battle of martial arts or a battle of moves, was still within the scope of their expectations. It was like a battle between two children. There was no need to care at all. But Yi Shiwen's current speed, even these celestial realm masters, after seeing it, still felt extremely amazed. Even these sky human stage experts were shocked, let alone the rest of them. Bang! With a loud noise, Yi Shiwen's fist fiercely hit Yi Shukong's chest. Boom! A loud explosion came, and then his figure was directly punched out like a cannonball, directly dragging a huge mark on the ground. His body directly dragged a crack on the ground that was tens of miles long, directly setting off countless smoke and dust. Only then did he stop. Everyone looked at Yi Shiwen in a daze. Green leaves fell, constantly flying and stirring in Yi Shiwen's momentum, and there was a burst of mournful wind in his ears. Is this his true strength? Someone exclaimed. Seeing this scene, he was simply dumbfounded. They could almost only see Yi Shiwen disappear, and then reappear, and then Yi Shukong was blasted out like a cannonball. Compared to just now, the current Yi Shiwen seemed more terrifying and daunting. If his strength just now seemed to be within the scope of everyone's understanding, then a pair of demon wings was equivalent to a tiger that had grown wings, and there was a fundamental improvement. Is Yi Shukong going to die? At this time, everyone had just stopped marveling at Yi Shiwen and turned to Yi Shukong. A terrifying power in the direction of Yi Shukong instantly boiled up. Countless terrifying cyclones, mixed with gravel and all kinds of debris, rose into the air. Yi Shiwen, you are the first to be able to force me to this extent. A cold, ruthless voice came from the smoke and dust. Everyone fixed their eyes and saw a figure crawling out of the ruins. His figure was also imposing, and an inexplicable aura was exuding from his body. It was a kind of majestic aura that overlooked all living beings. In the depths of the cloud platform, Some of the old antiques of the Yi family and other forces had a drastic change in expression. This was the aura of a legendary deity. Yi Shiwen. Do you know why I was able to reach this point without the Yi family's nurturing? Yi Shukong seemed to have recognized Yi Shiwen's strength and status, and was actually in the mood to chat with him. There was a cloud of smoke and dust, and Yi Shiwen could not see Yi Shukong's face clearly. He could only vaguely see a figure standing in it. His body exuded a kind of aura that Yi Shiwen felt was unusually familiar. Yes, it was a familiar aura. The aura of a deity. Yi Shiwen quickly realized that this aura was the aura of a deity. He had once slaughtered many descendants of demon gods on the demon island, so the divinity he had refined was still very important to him. Therefore, he would never forget this aura. Although it was a completely different deity, it must be said that the feeling of indifference and the feeling of treating all living beings as ants was exactly the same. It was just that in comparison, this deity's aura was purer than the descendants of demon gods that Yi Shiwen had slaughtered. Because I am the son of God. Yi Shukong's face could not be seen in the cloud of smoke and dust, but his cold voice could be heard. The son of God! Suddenly, everyone was stunned. It was hard to imagine that there would be such a reason. Everyone was boiling with excitement. Whether it was the Yi family or the forces of other clans, when they heard this news, they were completely boiling with excitement. Even the big shots in the depths of the cloud platform were the same, not because of anything else, but because of the Son of God. Since a long time ago, after the end of the mythological era ruled by the deities, after the twilight of the gods, the deities had already changed from a real existence to a legendary existence. Everything about the deities had been eliminated in the long river of history, little by little. In people's impression, those deities were arrogant, mysterious, cold, and they were the masters of everything in the world. Therefore, everything about the deities had become the focus of everyone's pursuit, and the most important thing was that they were immortal. Not only the human race, but also the real goal of other clans. After cultivating to the sky human realm, in reality, there was only one step left to reach this step. Just one more step, and they would be able to step into the realm of immortality. However, since the end of the mythological era, no one had been able to enter the realm of immortality, only one step away from entering the realm of immortality. Therefore, they were so keen to understand everything about the deities and wanted to unravel the mystery of the deities' immortality. However, the disappearance of the mythological era was too sudden, and there were not many things left behind, often becoming the collection of various behemoths. But now, a Son of God had actually appeared in front of them. If it was the Son of God, then everything could be explained, because the deities were the masters of the heavens and the realms, and the sons of God were the children of heaven who were favored by the heavens. They were born with the blood of the deities, and there were no obstacles in their cultivation at all. Even if they did not cultivate at all, because of the continuous awakening of the blood of the deities in their bodies, their cultivation would naturally rise at a crazy rate. They were born strong, and there were many legends about the sons of God in ancient times, but that was a long, long time ago. Chapter 12:17. In fact, there were many people in this world who possessed the bloodline of the gods. For example, the second god, whom Yi Shiwen had killed previously, possessed the bloodline of the legendary Titan clan. The Titan clan, even in the mythological era, was also a powerful clan of gods. But even so, he could not be regarded as the son of God. At most, he could only be regarded as having stimulated some of the bloodline of the Titan clan. He was far from being regarded as the son of God. In addition to the first generation of the gods, their descendants could only be regarded as the Son of God if they stimulated the concentration of the God's bloodline to more than 50%. Do not underestimate this 50%. In the records of the ancient books, except for the descendants of the gods and mortals who were naturally the Son of God, it was extremely difficult for other descendants to stimulate more than 50% of the bloodline. For many people, it was simply impossible. Of course, there were also some descendants who were born with genetic mutations and could possess more than 50% of the bloodline, such as Yi Shukong in front of him. Presumably, Yi Shukong originally did not want to expose that he was the son of God, because once exposed, there would be many people eyeing him covetously. After all, no one had been able to touch the legendary immortal realm of the gods for many years. Now that a son of God had suddenly appeared, how attractive would it be to those old guys who were about to die of old age? Yi Shiwen could imagine how terrifying that scene would be. If he was not born in the Yi family, if he was born in a small force, perhaps the small force would be completely destroyed on the spot. Then, Yi Shukong would also be captured and used as a guinea pig to explore the source of the god's majesty. In the countless years after the end of the mythological era, people had long lost any fear of the gods. There was even a saying that the reason why the mythological era ended was because the fear of the mortals towards the gods had disappeared. But now, Yi Shukong had been forced into a corner by Yi Shiwen, or rather, he was really angry. He would not hesitate to expose his identity as the son of God in order to defeat Yi Shiwen. At this time, everyone was no longer surprised. The son of God, if he was the son of God, then there was nothing to be surprised about. The son of God was born to be strong. There would be no obstacles in their cultivation, and they could cultivate all the way to the peak of the celestial being realm without the Yi family noticing. In the future, with the help of the Yi family, he could almost be described as a meteoric rise. It would not take long for him to enter the celestial being realm. The future was simply limitless. In this case, Yi Shiwen was almost finished. Only a god's son could contend against a god's son. Even a heaven's pride expert wouldn't be able to do so. After all, they were the favored children of the heavens. So, they possessed advantages that ordinary people couldn't imagine. It's a pity. If you hadn't met me, your championship would have been in the bag. Yi Shukong's figure became more and more blurred. He became more mysterious, noble, and cold. Although his realm did not continue to increase, his aura was constantly growing stronger, surging and bursting out. He looked even more tyrannical than Yi Shiwen. He no longer suppressed the aura of his body and completely released it all at once. Although countless people might spy on him, he didn't care about this at this time. He had unleashed his true fire, and if he couldn't defeat Yi Shiwen, it might even give birth to a heart demon. He was the son of God. Although he was not the real son of God, he was the favorite of the heavens. Some geniuses were called the son of God and were called the son of God. That was because they flattered themselves and called themselves the son of God. Only they, the son of God, were the true favorites of the heavens and were blessed by the heavens. Since the accidental awakening of his bloodline, everything had been smooth sailing for him. In the past, cultivation was a very difficult thing for him. However, since the awakening of his bloodline, cultivation became as easy as eating and drinking. He could instantly understand any profound power technique that was difficult to understand. It was as if he had the help of the god. This was the power of the Son of God. Therefore, although he was very low-key in the Yi family and nobody knew about him, in fact, no one in the younger generation was worthy of his attention. Even those who were called the Son of God were nothing in his eyes. The only thing he lacked was time. As long as he had enough time, he would definitely become a great figure that could shock the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries. However, he suffered a big loss in front of Yi Shiwen. He didn't gain any advantage in front of Yi Shiwen. It could even be said that he was constantly at a disadvantage. No matter what kind of trial he used, he couldn't completely suppress Yi Shiwen. This had never happened since the awakening of his bloodline. Therefore, he had become really angry and didn't hesitate to expose his identity as the Son of God. As for the fact that countless people would be spying on him at that time, and countless external forces would be itching to get rid of him. However, this was also a problem that the higher-ups of the Yi family would worry about after the competition. The imposing aura on his body was rising crazily. However, it had integrated with his body and seemed to be a natural entity. In the depths of Yi Shiwen's body, the sleeping Yimo was once again awakened by this aura. This is the aura of the gods. No, the opposite side is a son of God. Yimo quickly made a judgment. In this era where the gods don't exist, someone can actually awaken his bloodline and become the son of God. This in itself is a very miraculous thing. Yi Shiwen was shocked. Yimo was in the midst of evolution. It was impossible for ordinary things to wake him up from his deep sleep. Previously, it was because of the arrival of the Yi family's patriarch, and now it was because of Yi Shukong's aura. One could imagine that for Yimo, the appearance of the Son of God was also a very shocking thing. The mythological era had ended many years ago. The Son of God that appeared would naturally not be the real Son of God. However, for those who could awaken more than 50% of their bloodline, there was no difference. Facing a Son of God, how could Yi Shiwen not have a headache? If Yi Shukong was the favorite of the gods, then Yi Shiwen felt that he probably had some kind of grudge against the gods. Otherwise, why would he feel that the gods were beating him to death every time he crossed the heavenly tribulation? There was no feeling of leniency at all. Not to mention, when compared to the Son of God, who claimed to have no obstacles in his cultivation, it was not at the same level at all. But even so, he was determined to get the 9 revolutions Taishan golden pill. Yi Shukong did not necessarily have to get the 9 revolutions Taishan golden pill because he was the Son of God. Even without any external help, advancing into the celestial realm was as easy as eating and drinking. But it was different for him. Every time he crossed the heavenly tribulation, he felt like he was beaten to death. With the 9 revolutions Taishan golden pill, he was much more confident. There's no other way, Yi Shukong. The 9 revolutions Taishan golden pill is mine. Even if you're the Son of God, you can't stop me from moving forward today. Yi Shiwen laughed. Indeed, you're very special, but I'm even more special than you. As Yi Shiwen spoke, countless spiritual energies began to sweep wildly from his body, forming a huge spiritual energy shield around his body. The appearance of this shield was actually a legendary star colossus lying in the starry sky, choosing its prey to devour. The aura on Yi Shiwen's body also rose crazily little by little, and a terrifying spiritual energy swept wildly. A large area of smoke and dust was swept into a storm, sweeping outwards. What an amazing spiritual energy! At this time, countless spectators in the audience seats looked at Yi Shiwen, who was gradually merging into the giant beast, in astonishment. The true essence emitted from his body actually shocked them. Even if it was just spiritual chi, it was already stirring up the world and causing it to change color. What is that giant beast phantom? Does anyone recognize it? Someone asked hurriedly at this time. Is this the legendary star colossus that is recorded in the ancient books, the one that feeds on the star world? In the mythological era, this kind of fierce beast used to be infamous, known as a terrifying giant beast that could challenge the dragon clan. An old antique stared for a long time, and finally recognized the identity of the huge, fierce beast around Yi Shiwen. The Yi family had been passed down for many years. For many people, it might be a very rare question, but in the Yi family there were records of it. Star Colossus. Those big shots had a slight change in expression. It was another extremely fierce bloodline. The Star Colossus was known to be able to challenge and kill the Dragon Clan, and the Dragon Clan was known to be a race that could challenge the gods. It was conceivable how tyrannical this Star Colossus was. Although they had not actually seen the Star Colossus, they could already get a glimpse of it from the handwritten records of the predecessors. Because of Yi Shiwen, Yi Shukong constantly broke through his bottom line and constantly exposed his trump cards. Wasn't Yi Shiwen the same? First it was the Spirit Bomb, then the Demon Wings, and then the Star Colossus. Although he did not dare to transform into the real body of the Star Colossus now, he did not want to be like Yi Shukong and become a lab rat for others to dissect and study. However, there was no problem in condensing a fake body with endless spiritual energy. As the spiritual energy on Yi Shiwen's body became more and more intense, the face of the Star Colossus also began to gradually become clear, becoming more and more ferocious. And Yi Shiwen's figure also began to gradually disappear into the body of the Star Colossus composed of spiritual energy. It was like a wild beast had been resurrected all of a sudden, The terrifying spiritual energy stirred up a gust of wind, directly blowing away the smoke and dust in front of Yi Shukong, blowing his clothes and making a whistling sound. The astral wind blew on his face, causing a dull pain. His eyes became colder and colder. Chapter 12:18. Yi Shukong's body exuded a divine aura, just like a god in the world. Looking at him made people feel an urge to kneel down. Noble, mysterious, cold. On the other side, Yi Shiwen's body exuded an extremely violent aura, just like a ferocious beast with a terrifying aura. Two terrifying auras collided fiercely on the spot. One was noble, and the other was violent. It seemed that the two forces were incompatible at all, and they collided fiercely. Yi Shukong looked coldly at Yi Shiwen, whose aura had changed drastically. He was like a ferocious beast, just like a god who encountered those terrifying ferocious beasts in the ancient times. His body carried an indescribable sense of nobility and coldness. "Sword come!" Yi Shukong shouted loudly. In his hand, a sword condensed from spiritual energy suddenly appeared in his hand. This was not an ordinary sword aura. This sick sword was entwined with countless laws, and it had a chilling aura. Mortal sword breaks. The sword in his hand outlined a dreamy trace, mixed with the understanding of the Great Way. Ordinary people could not look directly at the light. Seeing Yi Shukong in this state, many masters at the seventh heaven of the law manifestation realm also had a slight change of expression at this time, because they found that if they were in Yi Shukong's shoes, they might be severely injured in an instant. If they were not careful, there was even a possibility of being killed. Although they also knew that it was impossible to maintain this peak combat state of the two for a long time, it was enough to severely injure them without maintaining this peak state for a long time. That sword light turned into a sky-covering sword aura in the void and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Those sword lights simply turned into an endless light curtain of swordsmanship in the air, completely crushing towards Yi Shiwen. On the other side, Yi Shiwen did not move at all. He was completely integrated into the star beast, as if he was originally a star beast. And just when the light curtain was about to crush Yi Shiwen's body, Yi Shiwen finally moved. His huge beast claw suddenly swung up and slammed fiercely on the ground. Boom! A huge explosion swept across the sky and rose up into the sky. In an instant, countless energy waves swept out in a frenzy and spread outwards. When the sword lights came into contact with the frenzied energy tide that was spreading outwards, they were instantly annihilated into light pillars. Endless airwaves swept out, directly flattening a large pit within a radius of more than 10 miles. It's just a casual wave of his hand, yet it possesses such terrifying power. Countless experts in the audience were dumbfounded when they saw this scene. They did not expect Yi Shiwen to have such power with just a wave of his hand. Both Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong's strength seemed to be far beyond their imagination. After the two of them displayed their full strength, they were so valiant that it made people tremble in fear. The smoke and dust gradually dispersed, revealing only the huge body of Yi Shiwen. He was motionless and completely unscathed. Not a single one of those sword lights was able to hit his body. This kind of terrifying power made everyone feel somewhat terrified. Even Yi Shukong narrowed his eyes. He did not expect that after Yi Shiwen's transformation, he would be so terrifying. It was not just a shell of spiritual energy. However, he didn't know that the outer shell of spiritual energy on Yi Shiwen's body was just a cover. It covered the star beast deity under the outer shell of his spiritual tool. After the star beast bloodline was stimulated, he became this terrifying appearance. Otherwise, it would be impossible to have such a terrifying power. It was just a shell of star beast, and it only resembled the form, but not the spirit. At this time, Yi Shiwen finally moved. He was going to launch a counterattack. He could feel that not only the terrifying consumption of maintaining this kind of star beast, but also because there were countless crazy and brutal thoughts swarming in an instant. They actually wanted to occupy the highest part of his brain. Although the Mingxin ancient tree emitted bursts of colorful light, blocking these brutal thoughts outside the sea of consciousness. This was not a long-term solution. The spirit bomb just now had already consumed half of his chi in one breath. Now he had transformed into the star beast mode that consumed chi. There was no way to fight for a long time. The only way was to end the battle quickly. It's really a terrifying confrontation. It turns out that Yi Shukong has reached such a realm, the Son of God. He has been hiding his strength and identity, but now he is forced out by Yi Shiwen. I'm afraid Yi Shiwen is going to be unlucky. This Yi Shiwen cannot be underestimated. I thought that this star beast was just a shell just now. I didn't expect it to be able to erupt with such terrifying power. When its claws fell, it actually erupted with such a terrifying explosion. But no matter how tyrannical Yi Shiwen is, it is impossible for him to be Yi Shukong's opponent. The Son of God, only the Son of God can fight against the Son of God. Even the prodigy, even if Yi Shiwen is an evildoer, it is impossible. First, there is such an evildoer Yi Shiwen. Now the Son of God is born in our Yi family. Is the heavens really going to bring prosperity to our Yi family? This is really great. After Yi Shiwen had made up his mind, he took the lead to launch an attack. His claws suddenly slammed forward, and then everyone only heard a boom sound. The entire ground in front of him completely collapsed. Boom! There was another terrifying loud noise. And then, along the direction of the collapse, another part of the ground completely collapsed. Boom! 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 The entire ground was like a domino, shattering inch by inch. Then, it was instantly blasted into the sky by a terrifying force. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact, it was just an instant. The shattered part had instantly spread from the ground to the sky. The endless air also collapsed in an instant, and the space was completely distorted. The terrifying force instantly blasted in front of Yi Shukong. Yi Shukong did not hesitate. He directly tapped his toes, and his figure instantly swept backward frantically. However, the terrifying force did not show any signs of stopping. It even turned and directly chased after Yi Shukong. This made Yi Shukong a little surprised. This force was actually controlled by Yi Shiwen in the distance, and it could even track him. At this time, he did not continue to escape. Instead, he spread his palm, and a sword was formed in the air. The sword light formed a huge sword curtain in midair, completely wrapping him in it. Boom! The energy directly hit Yi Shukong's body. The collision of the two terrifying forces directly set off a terrifying energy frenzy. In this terrifying collision, Yi Shukong was forced to take a few steps back to cushion the terrifying impact brought by this force. However, the air under his feet had been completely crushed, and there was not a trace left, forming a huge vacuum. Whoosh! And just when everyone had not fully reacted, the huge figure on Yi Shiwen's body had instantly rushed in front of Yi Shukong, and the huge claws suddenly pierced towards Yi Shukong fiercely. His claws were imbued with the power of wind and thunder, allowing his claws to instantly penetrate the void at an unimaginable speed. In an instant, it pierced through the void, and instantly pierced into Yi Shukong's chest as if it had pierced through the void. Yi Shukong's reaction was not slow either. Although he was a little slower than Yi Shiwen, he still reacted in an instant. He directly slashed out a huge sword lotus in his hand and slashed towards the huge claws. Boom! The sword lotus and the huge claws collided fiercely. Yi Shiwen's huge figure was forced to take a few steps back. Yi Shukong was even more unbearable. He directly retreated hundreds of meters before he could offset Yi Shiwen's terrifying force. The power of Yi Shiwen's tyrant body was already very terrifying, but after transforming back into the Star Beast avatar, Yi Shiwen's power was equivalent to the tyrant body plus the Star Beast avatar. One could imagine how terrifying it would become. Even Yi Shukong, the Son of God, could not do anything to his strange power. It could be seen how terrifying it was. I am the Supreme Sword Principle. I am the Supreme God. After Yi Shukong's figure stopped, he finally kept chanting. The sword light in his hand continued to slash out, each more terrifying than the previous one. However, these sword moves did not attack Yi Shiwen. Instead, they constantly condensed on top of his head. Every time he slashed out a sword light, the sword light above his head became more tyrannical and terrifying. As the sword light condensed and accumulated, it seemed to become more and more terrifying. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt the terror of this sword. The sword Dao domain around him began to show faint signs of boiling. It was getting sharper and sharper. Inch by inch, the domain of the power of wind and thunder around him was smashed. This slow change looked abnormally terrifying. He was accumulating a terrifying attack. At this time, Yi Shiwen had already moved. He burst out with a terrifying speed that was completely different from his huge speed. He directly rushed towards Yi Shukong frantically. He could not let Yi Shukong's sword completely condense. But at this time, Yi Shukong's attack seemed to be completed. A terrifying sword light was launched in an instant. It traversed the vast sky in an instant and turned into a terrifying torrent of energy. It slashed down towards Yi Shiwen, who was flying over. Boom! Yi Shiwen did not have time to dodge. The terrifying torrent of energy turned into an energy sword light and slashed on his body. It directly pierced through him and nailed him to the ground. Chapter 12:19. Boom! Yi Shiwen didn't have enough time to dodge. That terrifying torrent of energy transformed into an energy light sword and fiercely chopped his body. It directly pierced through him and severely nailed him to the ground. Yi Shiwen's huge body slammed into the ground, and with the terrifying power of the sword light, he was nailed to the ground on the spot. This is too terrifying. This Yi Shiwen is also a monster. I don't know what kind of adventure he had to have to be so terrifying. His physique should not be ordinary either, but it's also possible that he has a special bloodline physique. Someone said, in the Yi clan, there were many people with special constitutions. Some of them were because their ancestors had intermarried with other clans, leaving behind a different bloodline. Some of them had even awakened the bloodline of ancient humans and became incomparably terrifying. There were indeed not many people with such a special bloodline, but with so many people in the Yi clan, the probability was much higher. Indeed, I think so too. It's a pity. He should have been invincible, but he met a god's child that only appears once in 1,000 years. It's a pity that he met a god's child. It's his misfortune. Not only him, even the others are the same. Being born in the same generation as the god's child is in itself a tragedy for those geniuses. Their brilliance will all be annihilated by the god's child. Compared to the god's child, those geniuses and monsters are all fleeting clouds. They are not worthy to be mentioned in the same breath as the god's child. So, his good luck ends here. I don't know what kind of adventure Yi Shiwen had to be so terrifying, but it's time to end it. At this time, in the depths of the cloud platform, when the representatives of the other forces saw these two people, their expressions suddenly changed. Whether it was the abnormal monster Yi Shiwen or the god's child Yi Shukong, it was enough to make their expressions change. For the Yi clan to have such a genius, it was also a huge threat to them, especially the god's child Yi Shukong. As old monsters who had lived for God knows how many years, they knew very well what kind of creature the god's child was. They were not ordinary beings since they were born, and cultivation was as simple as eating and drinking. As long as they did not die prematurely, cultivating to the peak of the celestial realm was not a problem at all, and even among the peak of the celestial realm, they were extremely strong. Such a character would be a huge threat to any faction if he were to oversee it. If it was one of their own forces, they would naturally want as many of them as possible. But if it wasn't, they would naturally want as few as possible. Especially the foreign experts, their eyes were flickering as if they were thinking about how to get rid of these two people. Especially Yi Shukong, the son of God. What an awe-inspiring name. If they couldn't kill him now, he would become a huge problem for them in the future. Many of the big shots of the Yi clan were also having a headache at this time. They did not expect the situation to turn out like this. They did not expect Yi Shukong to be the son of God. Otherwise, they would not have given him the chance to reveal his identity as the son of God. They would have secretly taken him away and trained him. Now that they were exposed in public, it would be even more difficult to protect them. Yi Shiwen has been nailed to the ground. It seems that the outcome of this battle has been decided. Sure enough, only the Son of God can defeat the Son of God. Although Yi Shiwen is also a monster, after all, he is still several levels below. Second brother, Yi Chao Chao, and the others looked at Yi Shiwen worriedly. At this time, when they saw Yi Shiwen being nailed to the ground, they suddenly panicked. They had never seen Yi Shiwen being nailed to the ground. Even when he faced Yi Xing, he was easily defeated by Yi Shiwen. They were not opponents of the same level at all. Only in the face of Yi Shukong did Yi Shiwen reveal this embarrassing side of him. Son of God. No matter how ignorant they were, they knew how much weight these 3 words carried. Only the Son of God could fight against the Son of God. Although everyone believed that Yi Shiwen was going to be defeated, Yi Shukong, who was in midair, did not relax at all. He was constantly operating his martial arts to restore the consumed qi in his body. Because Yi Shiwen had not been taken away by the white light, it showed that he had not completely lost his combat power at this time. However, he did not take the opportunity to launch an attack. The sword just now had consumed 70 to 80% of his qi. Even if he launched an attack, it would not be powerful. However, Yi Shiwen was crazily operating the observing person scripture at a place where they couldn't see. The power of countless stars had wrapped up the light sword that had pierced through his huge body. Therefore, he hadn't been nailed to death by the sword. However, he didn't immediately pull out the lightsaber. Instead, he chose to wrap the entire lightsaber up. Although he did not want to say it, he had to admit that the Son of God was indeed the Son of God. This sword was not just an ordinary sword attack. It even contained many divine way laws, causing the power of this sword to explode to a terrifying extent. Even his tyrant body and star beast bloodline body was nailed to the ground on the spot. If an outsider were to see what Yi Shiwen was doing, they would probably be scared stiff because Yi Shiwen was refining these sword lights. He was stripping out the divine way principles from these sword lights. These principles could only be comprehended by gods. Only the sons of gods could instinctively use these principles that belonged to the divine way. The divine way laws had exceeded the level that mortals could understand. Even the Son of God could not understand them at all. They could use them, but they could not understand the principles behind them. It was like a person who could shoot a gun, but he did not necessarily know how to design a gun or even make a gun. But Yi Shiwen was different. He had the mysterious space. He could even analyze and understand these divine way laws, absorb and refine them. Of course, a part of his spirit crystal would be crazily burned every time he absorbed and refined a portion of this God's Tao law. However, his realm was also crazily improving. Even if he could only touch the edge of the God's Tao law, it would still be an unimaginable benefit for his realm. In addition to being analyzed and understood by him, these divine way laws were also refined into divinity. Only divinity could accommodate these divine way laws. For others, this sword was equivalent to severely injuring them. The sword aura that contained the divine way laws could destroy the muscles in their body crazily. They would soon be tortured to death. But for him, this was not the case. For him, there was Phoenix regeneration technique constantly healing him. These sword auras could not worsen his injuries at all. Therefore, it caused such a scene. Although he was severely injured, he was not taken away by the white light. To him, it was like someone was constantly explaining some things about the divine way to him, making him feel like his horizons had been broadened. That was why he wasn't in a hurry to retaliate, and he was constantly absorbing and refining the light sword instead. Fortunately, Yi Shukong was also recovering his Zhen Yuan. Coupled with the fear in his heart, he didn't dare to rashly launch an attack. This gave Yi Shiwen enough time to calmly absorb the light swords on his body, including some of the sword principles and divine principles. After a while, the whole scene was still in a stalemate. Just when everyone thought that the stalemate would continue, someone suddenly realized that the light sword on Yi Shiwen's body had disappeared. That light sword, it actually disappeared. Indeed, how could it possibly vanish? That's indeed a sword of light. But in reality, it's formed from the sword Tao laws and divine Tao laws. It's utterly impossible for it to vanish with the wind after the attack. Yi Shukong finally realized this, but his expression was still very calm because he had taken advantage of this time to recover to his peak. Even if Yi Shiwen took the opportunity to attack, he was not afraid at all. And at this moment, Yi Shiwen's pair of huge lantern-like eyes suddenly opened, bursting with a terrifying gaze. The aura on his body continued to rise, and very soon, it had recovered to its peak, as if the situation of the sword just now seriously injuring him did not exist at all. The wound that was originally cut by the light sword also recovered bit by bit under his gaze. In a short while, it was as if the previous serious injury did not exist at all. But what surprised countless people even more was that Yi Shiwen's aura had not yet risen to its peak. What shocked them was that Yi Shiwen's aura was actually still rising, and it was much more tyrannical than when it was at its peak just now. If Yi Shiwen had only just reached the third heaven of the Transcendence Realm before, then he had now reached the peak of the third heaven of the Transcendence Realm. In those 3 months, Yi Shiwen only focused on breaking through, but before he had time to deduce his cultivation to the peak of the third heaven of the Transcendence Realm, the competition began. Time did not allow him to continue cultivating at all. Fortunately, the opponent was not considered strong. Even if he did not push his cultivation to the peak of the third heaven of the Transcendence Realm, it was enough to deal with him. It was just that when facing the Son of God, Yi Shukong, he suffered a great loss. Now, in a short period of time, just refining the divine way laws on this light sword actually made his cultivation soar to the peak of the third heaven of the Transcendence Realm. As long as he calmed down, it was probably only a matter of time before he entered the fourth heaven of the Transcendence Realm. The profoundness and mystery of the divine way laws could be seen. After all, this was a law that only gods could comprehend. Yi Shiwen opened his bloody mouth and roared in a low voice, "I'm taking the 9 revolutions, Taishian Golden Pill. Son of God, or whatever lose." Chapter 1220. At this moment, everyone felt that the entire world had changed color along with Yi Shiwen's words. His roaring words instantly spread throughout the entire world of the arena. Yi Shukong's expression also changed slightly. He could not imagine how Yi Shiwen was not severely injured by his sword strike. On the contrary, his cultivation actually skyrocketed from the third sky of the Transcendence Realm to the peak of the third sky of the Transcendence Realm. Even some of the aura on Yi Shiwen's body made him feel a little familiar. That familiar aura could only be felt on his body before, but now he could actually feel it on Yi Shiwen's body. A tyrannical aura erupted from Yi Shiwen's body. The surging aura intertwined into a pillar of aura and shot straight into the sky. "I don't care what changes you have. Today's battle should end," Yi Shukong shouted coldly. As the Son of God, it was simply a shame for him to not be able to take down Yi Shiwen after such a long time. Even so, he had to admit that Yi Shiwen was indeed a monster. But no matter what kind of monster or genius, in front of his Son of God, they were all fleeting clouds, a laughable joke. "I am the supreme God." With a loud shout, the countless sword auras around him began to condense into a magic sword. The magic sword burst with unimaginable light, and his entire body entered the state of being one with the sword. Immediately afterward, the huge magic sword blasted towards Yi Shiwen at lightning speed, wanting to repeat the scene of Yi Shiwen being nailed to the ground previously. But compared to the Yi Shiwen just now, the current Yi Shiwen was like heaven and earth. He did not move at all. He just opened his bloody mouth, and countless waves of real yuan frantically condensed in his mouth. Countless spiritual auras were immediately absorbed by the real yuan in his mouth. The surrounding space trembled crazily. The boundless spiritual ether instantly turned into a terrifying sword that took shape in the air. It was actually somewhat similar to the sword that Yi Shukong had slashed out, but there was also a definite difference. Anyone could tell at a glance that it was a different sword. Swoosh! Yi Shiwen's final huge magic sword instantly blasted out, turning into a torrent of energy, and then blasted in the direction of Yi Shukong. Boom! The two huge magic swords collided fiercely in the air. It was too terrifying. Endless rays of light covered the entire sky. Endless white light completely covered the entire horizon. A terrifying mushroom cloud slowly rose with a loud bang, setting off a terrible airwave that directly flattened all the uneven objects into a huge pit. Two terrifying forces collided in the void, and countless dust clouds obscured everyone's vision. After a long time, the dust clouds finally dissipated. At this moment, everyone finally saw the situation in the arena clearly. In front of Yi Shiwen's huge body, a huge crack appeared in front of him and spread into the void. The two magical swords fought crazily. This was a battle of wills between the two, and it was not over yet. The two magical swords represented two completely different sword daos. Boom! All of a sudden, the terrifying power of both sides once again produced a terrifying explosion. One after another, countless void instantly collapsed with a loud rumble. Roar! Yi Shiwen's incarnation of Star Beast roared violently, and the terrifying sound waves instantly swept out in circles. The torrent of energy burst out of the magic sword he spat out was even more terrifying in an instant, and the light was even brighter. Bang! With a loud roar, the sword light that Yi Shukong slashed out began to shatter inch by inch in the void. How could this be? Yi Shukong looked at the scene in front of him, and suddenly felt a little incredulous. In such a short time, Yi Shiwen had actually become so much stronger. Just now, the sword could nail him to the ground, but now it could not do anything to him. This was something he never expected. The Son of God can't even suppress Yi Shiwen. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them in a daze. Not only Yi Shukong, but even they were also stunned. However, the torrent formed by the magic sword that Yi Shiwen spat out did not seem to have any intention of stopping. After the opponent was gone, it quickly and crazily swept up like a terrifying tornado and instantly blasted towards Yi Shukong. What Son of God? You shall all be defeated. Yi Shiwen laughed in a strange manner. He only felt that a brutal thought was trying to shake his absolute calmness. This thought was trying to affect his willpower. That was the instinct of a beast, not his instinct as a human. After integrating the Star Beast bloodline and obtaining huge benefits, naturally, he would not be completely unaffected. It was just that he had always been completely suppressed by Yi Shiwen. Break! At this time, Yi Shukong roared and slashed out several shocking sword lights in a row, trying to block the terrifying sword light spat out by Yi Shiwen. But at this time, it was obviously too late. Yi Shiwen, who had become more and more terrifying, broke through several shocking sword lights in a row and directly hit his body. Boom! At the same time that Yi Shukong stimulated the bloodline in his body, this was the first time he was directly hit by Yi Shiwen. Originally, he completely suppressed Yi Shiwen, but now, after absorbing the Divine Way Law, Yi Shiwen's strength was not just a little bit. The offensive and defensive momentum of both sides were reversed almost in an instant. Boom! His figure slammed into a mountain, directly smashing out a huge pit in this mountain range. Damn! How can this be? Yi Shukong finally lost his composure. He no longer had his previous calm and noble posture. Because previously, in his opinion, whether it was a genius or a monstrous talent, compared with the Son of God, they were far from being an opponent, so he did not need to care too much. But now, he was actually seriously injured in Yi Shiwen's hands. Yi Shiwen's strength suddenly increased to this level in a short time. This was absolutely unexpected and absolutely unacceptable. He, a dignified Son of God, actually could not suppress Yi Shiwen in a situation where he had the advantage in terms of realm. This was simply a great shame. It's all thanks to that sword of yours. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to comprehend so much. To reach this step today, it may take a few years. Yi Shiwen laughed. The face of the Star Beast outside him became more and more ferocious, and the brutal will become more and more intense, trying to control his actions. If there was no Mingxin ancient tree, the average person would have already become a complete madman. No matter how firm Yi Shiwen's will was, it would be useless. He actually comprehended the sword essence from that one strike. Countless people were shocked and stunned. If it were them, they would have been nailed to the ground on the spot, but he was the complete opposite. Not only did he not die, but he also comprehended something from it and became much stronger all of a sudden. Such a person could no longer be described as a monstrous talent. It's reversed. The situation has actually reversed. This time, I'm afraid Yi Shiwen will win. Everyone once again changed their views on this battle, as if both sides were amazingly strong, and it was a matter of course for either of them to win in the end. Even if Yi Shukong was the son of God, it seemed that it was not certain that he would win. Yi Shukong was seriously injured by Yi Shiwen's sword, but as the son of God, he had the blood of the gods flowing in his body. Even if he did not have the Phoenix regeneration technique like Yi Shiwen, his recovery ability was still great to a terrifying extent. It would not take long for him to fully recover, but would Yi Shiwen give him such a chance to recover? Of course not. Yi Shiwen was now more and more able to feel that the brutal will was actually trying to affect his will. He must not let this situation continue. Yi Shiwen made a judgment almost in an instant. Although his figure was huge, but with the addition of the demon wings, his speed was still terrifying. Boom! Before Yi Shukong had time to react, he saw a huge claw directly smashing down from the sky. Boom! His entire body was pressed down by this huge claw, and the entire ground completely collapsed, directly blasting a huge pit in the ground. Almost instantly, countless strands of sword chi surged out from the huge claw and rushed towards him. Boom! He was directly blasted out, and his figure flew directly into the air. He was about to struggle, but saw a huge black shadow instantly swept over. Another huge claw smashed down. Boom! His figure was instantly blasted away like a cannonball. Boom! 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 Yi Shukong's figure was blasted away countless times by Yi Shiwen, like a sandbag in the air, constantly being blasted away by Yi Shiwen. He did not have time to recover at all. Even if he was the son of God and had the bloodline of God, when facing the current Yi Shiwen, he still felt completely powerless. Boom! Once again, Yi Shukong was blasted heavily to the ground, no longer struggling to move. He still wanted to move, but there was no way at all. A white light flashed, and he was directly teleported out. In other words, his injuries had reached the standard of automatic surrender, and he was not allowed to continue fighting. This was also the method used by the Yi family to protect the participating disciples. Looking at Yi Shukong, who turned into a white light and was teleported out, everyone was still in a daze, unable to believe it. It was over just like that? Yi Shukong, the son of God whom they regarded as impossible to be defeated, was actually defeated, and in the end, he was directly defeated by Yi Shiwen without any chance to fight back. There was no luck at all. However, no matter what they thought, it was already indisputable that Yi Shiwen won the final championship. Chapter 12:21. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the god's child Yi Shukong was defeated by Yi Shiwen. Moreover, he was defeated without any provocation. In the end, everyone could see that Yi Shukong was completely suppressed. Yi Shiwen didn't give Yi Shukong any chance at all. His attacks were like a storm that never stopped. If it were them, they would have been defeated long ago. Although either of the two of them could win the championship, with one being the god's child and the other being a monster, they were going tit for tat and didn't give way to each other. However, when they saw Yi Shukong being defeated in the end, everyone was stunned. It wasn't strange for Yi Shiwen to defeat anyone with his strength. However, his opponent was the god's child whom everyone thought was unbeatable, and Yi Shukong who defeated him with a lower realm. The eyes of many experts from other clans flickered. They didn't come in vain this time. At least they knew where the Yi clan's hidden trump card was. If this god's child was allowed to grow up quietly, he would become an extremely terrifying expert once he was born in the future. No one would be able to restrain him. As for Yi Shiwen, although they were still paying attention to him, they didn't pay as much attention to him as the god's child Yi Shukong. Although Yi Shiwen's potential seemed to be stronger than Yi Shukong's, his potential was much worse than Yi Shukong's. No matter how strong he was now, he might be stuck in a certain realm. However, Yi Shukong was the god's child. It could be said that as long as he was given time, he would naturally step into the peak of the celestial realm and become a powerful figure that could shake the ancient Baron's continent. Yi Shiwen was miles ahead of him. Even if Yi Shiwen defeated Yi Shukong now, in their eyes, he wouldn't receive as much attention as Yi Shukong. Bloodline theory. Although Yi Shiwen didn't believe that a person's bloodline could determine a person's life, he had to admit that many people believed in this theory. In fact, in most cases, this wasn't wrong. People with superior bloodlines could indeed gain the upper hand in many situations. In most cases, people with superior bloodlines would have higher achievements. However, it wasn't absolute. For example, this time, everyone thought that the god's child was invincible, but in the end, he won the final victory and won the championship. Yi Shiwen slowly shed his star beast real body and returned to his human form. He trod on the light and walked out of the arena. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him. He was the champion of this tournament. He had such qualifications. Everyone's eyes were firmly locked on his body. Yi Shiwen turned a blind eye to them. Soon, a master trod on the light and arrived in front of him, saying, "Yi Shiwen, you are the champion of this year's competition. Come with me. The clan lord wants to see you." Yi Shiwen nodded and followed this expert towards the depths of the cloud platform. He soon entered the depths of the cloud platform. The enchantment in the depths of the cloud platform directly isolated everyone's sight. So, they couldn't see Yi Shiwen's figure. Yi Shiwen entered into the depths of the cloud platform. He saw towering thrones towering above the clouds in the depths of the cloud platform. Several tyrannical figures were sitting on these thrones. In the middle, on the highest throne, a peerless figure was sitting on it. Although he didn't have a huge body, he had a majestic aura. This was the clan master of the Yi clan, the supreme existence of the Yi clan. Yi Tianxiong. He was a legendary figure. Even in the ancient Baron's continent, Yi Tianxiong was a famous and terrifying figure. His life was a legend to ordinary people. Beside him were the influential figures of the Yi clan. Yi Shiwen greets the clan master. Yi Shiwen cupped his hands and said, "How dare you be so rude in front of the clan master?" Before Yi Tianxiong could speak, a loud shout came from a throne on his left. A middle-aged man shouted at him angrily. Yi Shiwen frowned. Although he didn't know who this person was, he had already classified him as an enemy. It was most likely the higher-ups who weren't friendly to him. He was the champion of the battle conference. It was fine if the higher-ups of the Yi clan didn't try to rope him in, but they were actually trying to suppress him. Had the higher-ups of the Yi clan become so rotten? If that was the case, he didn't mind staying in the Yi clan. He remembered the appearance of this middle-aged man. If possible, he would find a way to get rid of him. If this was spread, probably no one would believe that a warrior in the law manifestation realm would dare to plot against a terrifying heaven realm expert when they just met. However, for Yi Shiwen, this was nothing. As long as someone was hostile to him and tried to deal with him, he wouldn't let them go easily. So what if it was a heaven realm expert? Even if it was a god, he wouldn't be captured without putting up a fight. Yi Shiwen's killing intent didn't escape the eyes of the middle-aged man who had been paying attention to Yi Shiwen. He suddenly flew into a rage. Ever since he entered the heaven realm, he had always been in a high position. No one had ever dared to release killing intent to him, not even this restrained killing intent. In his opinion, Yi Shiwen was simply too daring. He was simply seeking his own death. "How dare you? How lawless? How dare you plot against me, in front of me?" The middle-aged man suddenly became furious and roared. "You really have evil intentions. Such a person, even if he grows up in the future, he will be a scourge to our Yi clan. He should be eliminated as soon as possible." The other big shots of the Yi clan looked at Yi Shiwen in astonishment. They couldn't help but think that he was really daring. He actually dared to plot against them, big shots in the heaven realm. Even the word lawless was not enough to describe him. He was simply too daring. However, they didn't have any intention of going along with the middle-aged man's idea of erasing Yi Shiwen. This matter hadn't reached the point of being erased yet. That's enough, Yi Qian. At this time, the clan master Yi Tianxiong said with a steady and deep voice. But the middle-aged man, Yi Qian, was still very unwilling and glared at Yi Shiwen. He completely didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would dare to plot against him. He had always been the one plotting against others. No one had ever dared to plot against him, not to mention a junior that he didn't even care about. Although Yi Qian was unwilling, he didn't dare to contradict the majesty of the clan master. Yi Shiwen didn't grow up in our Yi clan. Our Yi clan has never given him any benefits. It's not rude of him to do this, Yi Tianxiong said, which could be considered as the final conclusion of this matter. His eyes were calm and unwavering, so deep that one couldn't see the end of it. He didn't have any fluctuations because of Yi Shiwen's etiquette at all. At his level, how could he not let go of this kind of thing? Etiquette came from the heart. If there was a person who was not convinced at all, even if he was completely polite in front of you every day, so what? And if there was a person who sincerely respected you, so what if he couldn't be polite? Moreover, he knew that Yi Shiwen was after all different from the talents cultivated by their Yi clan. It was not an easy thing to win the hearts of such a person who was born unconventionally. Moreover, everyone knew in their hearts what happened some time ago. I'm very surprised that you can defeat Yi Shukong. Although he has been hiding very well, I have always been watching him. I just didn't expect that this time you could force his true self out and defeat him. You are indeed a genius. Yi Tianxiong looked at Yi Shiwen and said with a hint of praise in his tone. Many big shots of the Yi clan, including Yi Shiwen, looked at the clan master with some astonishment. It was the first time they knew that Yi Shukong was the son of God, and they were shocked. They didn't expect that the clan master had already known about it. They also had a new understanding of the power of the clan master, including Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had a bolder conjecture in his heart. This time, the clan lord had agreed to take out the 9 Revolutions' great mystery golden pill as a reward. Could it be that it was simply for Yi Shukong? Could it be that he was using this open and above-board way to cultivate Yi Shukong? Based on the Yi clan master's calm and collected personality, this might be the case. As for Yi Xing, he never thought that without him, Yi Xing would definitely not be a match for Yi Shukong. In the end, Yi Xing would basically be defeated. In the Yi clan, the relationships were complicated. Any small matter could affect the whole situation, so he had to be careful when dealing with it. Before Yi Shukong's identity as the son of God was exposed, the clan master could only use this roundabout method to cultivate Yi Shukong. This was not impossible. A person who could become the clan master would naturally not be a very biased person. Otherwise, he would not have been able to convince everyone. At this time, Yi Tianxiong looked at Yi Shiwen and asked, his eyes slightly anxious, "Some time ago, we did not quickly list you as a key cultivation target. Do you disagree?" "I don't agree," Yi Shiwen said without any hesitation. As expected, he is full of resentment. Such a person should be expelled from the clan. At this time, Yi Qian, who was not far away, spoke again. His voice was a bit cold. "It's already good enough that we didn't eliminate such a person, let alone cultivate him. As the saying goes, fire can see through real gold. Time can also test a person's heart. Such a person is not worthy of being cultivated by our Yi clan." The other big shots of the Yi clan did not agree with this statement. Yi Qian was still making a fuss. If it were him, how could he not resent? He was a genius, but the clan didn't nurture him. Not only that, but they were also suppressing him everywhere. Who wouldn't be extremely angry, ah? This was human nature, but Yi Shiwen dared to say it out loud. This proved that he had a pure heart and wasn't a scheming and shrewd person. If he had said that he was willing at this time, then they would have been afraid of him and might have even given birth to killing intent in their hearts. Chapter 12:22. As it turned out, Yi Shiwen was right. Sure enough, Yi Tianxiong looked at Yi Shiwen with a satisfied look in his eyes. Although Yi Shiwen said that he was not convinced, in fact, telling the truth was more appreciated by these big shots. Of course, The premise was that it could not be someone like Yi Qian who was biased against Yi Shiwen from the beginning. Yi Shiwen soon came to know that this Yi Qian was the father of Yi Xing's big shot. It wasn't difficult to find out. In fact, many people knew about the relationship between Yi Qian and Yi Xing. This kind of news and rumors had spread far and wide even before Yi Xing had returned to his family. Yi Qian didn't want to hide it. This kind of thing was relatively common among many big shots. So, it wasn't strange at all. There was no doubt that Yi Qian would target Yi Shiwen like this, because Yi Xing was eliminated by Yi Shiwen. This was almost without a doubt. Compared to the ambitious Yi Xing, Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong could be said to be unexpected guests who came out of nowhere. In fact, if there was no 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill, Yi Shiwen would not have such a strong desire to win. He would not be willing to give up until he won the championship. Of course, Yi Shiwen did not know that there was another very important reason in addition to him eliminating Yi Xing. It was the ownership of the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill. Yi Qian did not know how much he had to pay to get the Patriarch to agree to give the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill as a reward. Originally, he planned to give it to Yi Xing. However, who knew that Yi Xing would be eliminated by Yi Shiwen? In other words, he suffered a double loss. He had paid a huge price to let Yi Xing obtain the benefits, but now it had completely fallen into Yi Shiwen's hands. How could he not hate Yi Shiwen? Even a big shot like him had to think of a way to get the Patriarch to agree to give the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill as a reward. One could imagine how much he had paid in order to get the Patriarch to agree to give the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Pill as a reward. Now, all of it had gone to Yi Shiwen. He was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. It would be strange if he still liked Yi Shiwen. Very good. Yi Tianxiong was very satisfied with Yi Shiwen's answer. It was normal to have complaints. It would be strange if Yi Shiwen didn't have any complaints. In the future, the rewards and resources you will receive will not be reduced. Originally, I wanted to recruit you personally, but since you have already joined the Law Enforcement Hall, I will not say anything more. The Law Enforcement Hall is the law enforcement agency of our Yi family. Joining it will also give you a promising future. Thank you, Patriarch. Yi Shiwen cupped his hands and said, everything was as he had imagined. If he was a nobody, then he might not even know how he died. However, after he had shown his talent, they didn't dare to look down on him anymore. In this world, only the strong could gain respect no matter where they went. In the eyes of these people, although he wasn't considered a strong person yet, he was still a strong person in the future. In the future, he would be qualified to become one of them. This is your reward. At this time, Yi Tianxiong waved his hand, and a brilliance fell into Yi Shiwen's hand. It was a Qingquan bag. Yi Shiwen immediately used his divine senses to explore it. It was filled with the rewards of this tournament's champion. It was extremely generous. In addition to 200 million spirit crystals, there were many kinds of standard-grade elixirs, swords, spears, halberds, and various kinds of earth-grade martial instruments. Of course, the most important one among them was the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Elixir. In the depths of the Qingquan bag, a golden elixir was sealed and locked in it. The elixir exuded a torrent of medicinal energy, but it was blocked by the barrier to ensure that the medicinal efficacy would not be lost. The elixir exuded amazing spirituality, as if once the barrier was released, it would automatically gain spiritual wisdom and fly away. Yi Shiwen understood that this was a standard-grade elixir. The 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Elixir was finally in his hands. These rewards were quite generous. One must know that 200 million spirit crystals wasn't a small amount even at the peak of Yi Shiwen's wealth. However, 200 million spirit crystals was at least more than half of the wealth of other people. In fact, it might even be all of the wealth of some poor people. Not to mention, there were many different kinds of pills and magic tools. These were not common goods that could be bought outside. Many of them were only rewarded to the outstanding disciples of the Yi family and were not sold to the public. These rewards were generous, but Yi Shiwen only really cared about the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Elixir. With the 9 Revolutions Taishan Golden Elixir, today's hard work was worth it. After receiving the rewards, Yi Shiwen did not stay here for a long time. He left the cloud platform and returned to the courtyard of the Loya City branch in the guest city. There, Yi Junhai, Yi Junyan, Yi Mao, Yi Kai, and Yi Qiao Qiao were already waiting for him. Second brother, you are so amazing. As soon as Yi Shiwen entered the door, Yi Qiao Qiao flew up to him and did not treat him as an outsider. She looked at Yi Shiwen with little stars in her eyes. She did not expect Yi Shiwen to be able to do this. Even the son of God, Yi Shukong, was completely defeated by him. This could no longer be described as amazing. She had witnessed that battle with her own eyes. It was simply unimaginable. That kind of battle was not so much a battle between humans, but rather a battle between monsters. That was really beyond their imagination. It was not like a normal human at all. Yi Kai had a similar expression at this time. Anyone who had seen the battle between Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong with their own eyes would not be able to remain calm like this. Second brother, tell us quickly, what rewards did you get? Besides the 9 revolutions Taishian Golden Elixir, what else did you get? Yi Qiao Qiao looked at Yi Shiwen and asked. Yi Shiwen smiled and took out a lot of medicinal pellets and instruments directly from the Qingquan bag. Basically, all of them were divided into 3 parts and distributed to Yi Mao, Yi Kai, and Yi Qiao Qiao. These are all your hard work. It is not appropriate to give them. Yi Junhai frowned and said, It's okay. These are just worldly possessions for me. Yi Shiwen waved his hand and said, Although many of these medicinal pellets were relatively rare and many of them were even holy healing items, it did not matter to Yi Shiwen, who had the Phoenix regeneration technique. He did not need those celestial weapons. His physical body could easily destroy some low-grade Earth-level celestial weapons. Unless it was the Tianyuan Mirror or the Emergence Immortal Exterminating Saber, which were extremely powerful Earth-level celestial weapons, they were dispensable to him. However, it was nothing for Yi Shiwen. For Yi Mao, Yi Kai, and Yi Qiao Qiao, there was no doubt that they had made a windfall, especially those Earth-level instruments. Among the rewards that Yi Shiwen received this time, there were many Earth-level instruments. Basically, all of them were above the advanced Earth level. There were even a few top-level Earth-level instruments. For many experts in the law manifestation realm, even a low-level Earth-level instrument was an extravagant hope, let alone the advanced Earth-level instruments. With these instruments, their combat effectiveness suddenly increased by a level. Yi Kai and Yi Qiao Qiao could even defeat the experts in the first level of the law manifestation realm with the help of the top-level Earth-level instruments. The instruments that were useless to Yi Shiwen were very useful in their hands. It can only be said that Yi Shiwen was too abnormal. Not to mention those medicinal pills, which were naturally extremely beneficial for their future cultivation. Originally, these were only rewarded to the top geniuses. Now, because of Yi Shiwen, they could also enjoy them. Yi Junhai saw that Yi Shiwen's attitude was firm, so he no longer insisted. He believed that Yi Shiwen had his own rational judgment, but he was still very pleased in his heart. Second brother, if you can see one today, you should be satisfied. Yi Junhai looked at Yi Shiwen with eyes full of gratification. His outstanding posture made it seem as if he had seen Yi Junshan come back to life. With such a son, what more could he ask for? After the ancestral worship ceremony, let's go and worship your father together, said Yi Junhai. Yi Shiwen nodded. Finally, it was time to face this father that he had never seen before. At the tournament, the matter of Yi Shiwen winning the championship spread like a gust of wind throughout the entire Yi family overnight. All kinds of things about the entire tournament also became a topic that many people took pleasure in talking about. Especially Yi Xing, who was originally favored by many people, was easily surpassed by Yi Shiwen. There was also the matter of God's son, Yi Shukong. Although he was defeated by Yi Shiwen in the end, the title of God's son was already more resounding than Yi Shiwen. Although he was the champion, there were far less people discussing Yi Shiwen than Yi Shukong. In particular, the shocking battle between the two of them, where they were forced to use their trump cards, became a battle that everyone recalled. Whether it was Yi Shukong's activation of the god's descendant bloodline or Yi Shiwen's transformation into Star Beast, it was a rare battle for them. These two people, without a doubt, had great fortuitous encounters. In this aspect, even many Heaven-tier experts might not be able to compare to these two people, especially God's son, Yi Shukong. It was already a great opportunity for him to be able to awaken his bloodline. Was there any greater adventure than this? With this god's descendant bloodline, his future cultivation would be smooth sailing. Cultivation would be as simple as eating and drinking. Yi Shiwen was not an ordinary person either. The fact that he was able to defeat the god's child, Yi Shukong, with a cultivation level lower than his, in itself showed that his fortuitous encounter was also top-notch. In particular, his tyrannical physique and extraordinary speed were talked about enthusiastically by many people. Many people wanted to investigate, but in the end, they did not know where to start. Yi Shiwen was too mysterious. Yi Shukong grew up in the Yi family, so it was easy to find out who he was. However, Yi Shiwen had always been outside. And just when everyone was talking about this, the outstanding young geniuses of the younger generation who had performed outstandingly in this tournament had also received the high-level training notice. And regarding Yi Shiwen's training notice, it was also quickly sent to the Luye City branch family. Chapter 12:23. In the tournament, some people who performed well would be nurtured by the higher-ups. Of course, depending on the degree of talent they displayed, the nurturing they would receive would naturally be different. Originally, the champion of the tournament should receive the best nurturing and the most resources. However, due to the appearance of the Son of God, Yi Shukong, he was able to enjoy the same treatment as Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen didn't care about it. The treatment others received had nothing to do with him. After so many years, he had already gotten used to it. It was better to rely on himself than on others. In this regard, Yi Shiwen felt that the Yi clan had done a much better job than the Yi Yuan sect and the true martial school. As long as one had enough talent, there would naturally be a lot of resources thrown at him. Therefore, the Yi clan was able to prosper for a long time. It wasn't without reason. In addition to some disciples who had a relatively high ranking, there were also those who had tyrannical strength but bad luck. These people would also be nurtured as key-seeded players. After all, the purpose of the tournament was to select geniuses. How could they just watch and not nurture geniuses? Indeed, some people might be lucky enough to occupy a higher position. However, most of the time, wasn't luck also a part of one's strength? One shouldn't underestimate the importance of luck in one's strength. Some people were born with great luck and would trip over spiritual treasures when they went out. Then, they would accidentally subdue a spiritual beast after tripping. Such a heaven-defying thing had happened before in the ancient Barons continent. These people didn't seem to be very strong. Sometimes they were even pitifully weak. However, there was no way to kill them. Moreover, any enemy would inexplicably encounter some problems. For example, they would go berserk on the spot, be stabbed to death by a sword, or suddenly be chased by a monster. This kind of nonsensical thing would often happen to these people's opponents. Therefore, something like luck might seem nonsensical and funny, but in fact, it was very likely to happen. Therefore, no one dared to underestimate these people with heaven-defying luck. Otherwise, if they were to go against them, they might accidentally step into a pit, fall into a seal, or choke to death while drinking water. Because the opponent's luck was strong. Conversely, it was their own luck that was bad. After every competition, there would always be a group of people who stood out from the crowd and were then heavily nurtured by the family. This was also the reason why there were so many people signing up to participate in the tournament every time. Although their strength was far from enough, they were all gambling on their luck. In the past, there had been cases where, although their strength was not enough, they had relied on good luck to charge all the way to the top 10. Moreover, even if he couldn't make it into the top 10, he would still be able to get a lot of rewards if he could pass one more round. Therefore, many people chose to participate in the competition. Law Enforcement Hall's Heavenly Prison? Yi Shiwen had received a notice to go to the Law Enforcement Hall's Heavenly Prison. Yi Shiwen soon came to know what kind of place the Law Enforcement Hall's Heavenly Prison was. there was a place called the Heavenly Prison in the Yi clan. It was used to imprison all kinds of criminals of the Yi clan. Basically, it was a dangerous place in the eyes of outsiders. In addition, the Heavenly Prison was also a secret training place for the elite disciples of the Law Enforcement Hall. Generally speaking, only some elite disciples could enjoy such treatment. Yi Shiwen had now joined the Law Enforcement Hall. Naturally, the Law Enforcement Hall would personally take care of him if he wanted to be nurtured. It was not the turn of other institutions to intervene. However, it was not easy even for the elites of the Law Enforcement Hall to enter the Heavenly Prison to practice, because it was not free of charge. One must have a certain amount of contribution points to exchange for the time to practice in the Heavenly Prison. However, it was said that 1 day of practice in the Heavenly Prison was equivalent to 10 days outside. One's cultivation would progress at lightning speed. It was said that Yi Jintian had personally given the order to allow Yi Shiwen to practice in the Heavenly Prison for a year because he had won the championship of this competition. Of course, as long as Yi Shiwen could continue to make enough contributions for the Law Enforcement Hall, then he could continue to practice in the Heavenly Prison. This Heavenly Prison was the common property of the entire Yi clan. Therefore, even the hall master of the Law Enforcement Hall, like Yi Jintian, couldn't casually allow anyone to practice in it. Before Yi Shiwen, Yi Shui had already entered into closed-door practice. It was said that she was practicing in the Heavenly Prison. Yi Shui had served the Law Enforcement Hall for many years. Coupled with her own talent, no one knew how many contribution points she had accumulated. At least, it was enough for her to practice in the Heavenly Prison for a long time. Yi Shiwen calculated it himself. If he were to include the contribution points he had accumulated through the Martial Essence Tower and the competition, it would be enough for him to practice in the Heavenly Prison for several years. He suddenly realized that it was actually very easy for him to accumulate these contribution points. The more talented one was, the easier it was to accumulate these contribution points. For ordinary people, they might need to accumulate contribution points for hundreds of years before they could accumulate enough contribution points to practice in the Heavenly Prison for a year. Of course, this was also because the contribution points were far more than that. They couldn't be like Yi Shiwen and use all of them to exchange for medicinal pellets and instruments. After all, there were only a few people like Yi Shiwen who were self-sufficient. It just so happens that you go to the Heavenly Prison to practice for a year. At that time, the ancestral worship ceremony will be over. You can come out of closed-door practice and go with us to pay respects to your father. When Yi Shiwen told Yi Junhai about this matter, Yi Junhai pondered for a while and said directly, "But big brother, the Heavenly Prison is known as the graveyard of geniuses. Even the existence known as geniuses in the outside world will suffer heavy casualties after entering." Yi Junyan said with concern. Yi Kai and Yi Qiao also didn't make a fuss. Obviously, they also knew the illustrious reputation of the Heavenly Prison. Although it was said that practicing in that place for a year was equivalent to practicing outside for 10 years, practicing in that place for a year could simply reduce one's lifespan by 10 years. It was still possible to survive. Many people who were known as geniuses became disabled in there, and there was no way for them to recover forever. It doesn't matter, third uncle. There is no place in this world that can't stop me. A man should accept hardships. Yi Shiwen waved his hand and said he was the least afraid of this kind of hardships. Along the way, he had experienced all kinds of hardships. These were just trivial things for him. Well said. When grew up outside the family, he is not a flower in a greenhouse. How can those so-called geniuses be compared with Wen I believe that Wen is absolutely fine. At this time, Yi Junhai nodded and said, after Yi Shiwen showed that he could defeat the Son of God, he was not so worried about Yi Shiwen anymore. In other words, he was not worried at all. Yi Shiwen could even defeat the Son of God. Obviously, Yi Shiwen's hidden strength was much deeper than theirs. Although it was distressing for such a child to grow up in the outside world, it was also more reassuring. In that case, I won't say much. You have to be careful in the Heavenly Prison. Yi Junyan did not say anything more. He was a person with a fiery temper. He was only worried about Yi Shiwen, the only son of his second brother. Otherwise, he would not have said anything more. And Yi Shiwen nodded. The ancestral worship ceremony would last for about a year. There were many cumbersome procedures to be carried out. When Yi Shiwen came out of the heavenly prison, it would almost be over. At that time, Yi Shiwen could go to worship Yi Junshan again. These were all completely possible. However, Yi Shiwen did not intend to go directly to the heavenly prison. He had now entered the peak of the third level of the law manifestation realm. He was only one step away from entering the fourth level of the law manifestation realm. This was all thanks to the comprehension in Yi Shukong's sword. Now he was only one step away from the breakthrough. He had already made up his mind to go to the heavenly prison after the breakthrough. He had only heard about the heavenly prison. He was not clear about the specific situation. He could only choose to enhance his strength as much as possible. After making up his mind, Yi Shiwen immediately set up the array in the small courtyard of the branch family in Luya City and began to retreat. Second brother went to retreat again. It's really boring. Seeing that Yi Shiwen went to retreat again, Yi Qiao pouted and said while kicking the stones in the yard with her little feet, "That's why, brother, one has such amazing strength. If you are willing to work harder in retreat, will you be stuck in the half-step law manifestation realm?" Yi Mao said with a straight face. In fact, whether it was Yi Kai or Yi Qiao, their talents were not bad, but their temperament was unstable. They were already hundreds of years old, but they were still like children. However, according to their lifespan of at least thousands of years, at this time, they were indeed just children. However, they had to sigh in their hearts. If Yi Shiwen did not seize all the time to cultivate, how could he have this strength? He could even defeat the Son of God. Did this strength fall from the sky? 1 minute on the stage, 10 years of work off the stage. Everyone could only see the glory in front of others. How many could see his efforts behind the scenes? Yi Shiwen naturally did not know what was happening outside. At this time, apart from attaching a trace of spirit to the barrier to guard, he had devoted himself to cultivation. He had already entered the peak of the third level of the law manifestation realm. At this time, he was only a thin layer of window paper away from the fourth level of the law manifestation realm. He could break through at any time. He sat cross-legged on the bed. Countless bloodstones were dissolved into blood qi and then instilled into his body, causing his body to emit bursts of blood qi. Chapter 12:24. The power of the stars in his body began to be mobilized, and a huge amount of spiritual yuan formed a storm around his body, spewing out from every pore on his body. If not for the formation concealing all the aura, many people would have been alarmed by this time. Under his mobilization, countless blood qi turned into spiritual yuan and began to crazily rush at the barrier of the fourth level of the transcendence realm. For an ordinary person, it would be very easy for them to make a breakthrough if they had the same level of cultivation as Yi Shiwen. However, although Yi Shiwen's cultivation was much thicker than that of an ordinary person, but at the same time, each step was also much more difficult than that of an ordinary person. Every breakthrough was much more difficult than ordinary people's. In the depths of his divine sense, countless rays of light from the Mingxin ancient tree shrouded his sea of consciousness, allowing him to be in a state of enlightenment at any time and place. This was an advantage that ordinary people could not imagine. Even the Son of God couldn't enter the state of epiphany at any time and place like him. However, Yi Shiwen could naturally enter the state of epiphany as long as he had enough Ling Qi. For ordinary people, this wasn't as simple as a monstrous talent. In the process of him constantly breaking through the barrier of the fourth level of the transcendence realm, 10 days had finally passed. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye, and many people did not even feel the passage of time. During these 10 days, the discussion about Yi Shiwen and the Son of God was still in progress. In particular, the various magical performances of the Son of God, Yi Shiwen had already opened everyone's eyes. After that, he was personally taken in by the clan head and became the clan head's personal disciple. Later, he was personally taken away by the clan head to be groomed. With the clan head's level of daily affairs, Now that he had taken Yi Shiwen away to be groomed personally, one could imagine how important Yi Shiwen was in the clan head's heart. If other geniuses could only be said to have a chance to enter the celestial realm in the future, then the Son of God would definitely be able to reach the clan head's level in the future, and even grow to become an expert even more tyrannical than the clan head. That was why the patriarch looked at him differently. In the eyes of the higher-ups, Yi Shiwen certainly had a lot of potential, but there was obviously a big gap between him and the Son of God, Yi Su-kong, who had awakened the bloodline of the gods. Although he was defeated by Yi Shiwen, no one would underestimate him because of that. The contest between these Heaven's Pride experts wasn't just limited to 1 or 2 matches. On the contrary, they would compete for thousands of years in the future. A momentary victory or defeat didn't mean anything at all. In fact, many people believe that although Yi Shiwen had defeated Yi Shukong now, he might have to crawl under Yi Shukong's feet in the future. But even so, Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong were still the focus of everyone's discussion, especially since these two people could not be regarded as cultivated by the family. Even Yi Xing, who was ranked 3rd, appeared as an illegitimate child. Many people began to reflect on whether there was really a problem with the entire family's cultivation system. None of the top 3 in this year's tournament had any obvious relationship with the family, which meant that Yi Xing could be considered to have been secretly cultivated by a big shot. On the other hand, the growth of Yi Shiwen and Yi Shukong obviously had nothing to do with the entire family. Although Yi Shukong grew up in the family, his growth had little to do with the family. He was completely self-taught, and all kinds of martial arts were mostly self-created or came from the awakening of bloodline memories. And Yi Shiwen had nothing to do with the Yi family at all. He purely grew up outside. They could grow to this level without relying on the family's resources. In addition to showing their outstanding talent, it also proved that the family's cultivation system was a failure. However, these had nothing to do with Yi Shiwen, who was in closed-door training. He rarely really cared about the comments of the outside world. 10 days later, in the room, Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes, and then the spiritual energy in his body was like a flood that could not be stopped at all. It completely poured out, turning into a torrent that swept in all directions. The formation that was originally set up could not withstand the impact of this torrent and was instantly broken. This powerful aura instantly rushed up to the sky. Yi Junhai, Yi Junyan, and the others who had been watching Yi Shiwen's closed-door training also discovered this immediately. They were very pleased to see Yi Shiwen constantly improving, and their hearts were also very satisfied. Soon, the aura that originally rushed up to the sky disappeared without a trace and was absorbed into Yi Shiwen's body. Finally, he was at the 4th level of the Law Manifestation realm. His combat power had also entered a whole new realm. He could even compete with the masters at the 7th level of the Law Manifestation realm. This wasn't just a simple matter as his combat power had increased by 1 level. In the Transcendence realm, before the 4th level of the Transcendence realm, he could only be regarded as the early stage of the Transcendence realm. Before the 7th level of the Transcendence realm, he could only be regarded as the middle stage of the Transcendence realm. Only by truly stepping into the 7th level of the Transcendence realm could he be regarded as stepping into the late stage of the Transcendence realm. Compared to the middle stage of the Transcendence realm, it was a huge step. It was definitely not as simple as a little improvement. Instead, he had risen to a whole new level and was completely different from before. If it was the him from 10 days ago, he would definitely not be a match for the current him. In fact, he might not even be able to withstand a few moves before being completely defeated. This was a complete transformation of his strength. After breaking through to the 4th level of the Law Manifestation realm, Yi Shiwen did not continue closed-door training. As for consolidating the realm, he could do it in the Law Enforcement Prison. Law Enforcement Prison, the tomb of the legendary genius. I'm coming. Yi Shiwen's eyes were bright. The next day, early in the morning, Yi Shiwen bid farewell to his first uncle, 3rd uncle, and Yi Mao, and went to the law enforcement city. Although the law enforcement hall had branches in various places, the headquarters was in the law enforcement city. As the headquarters of the law enforcement hall, the law enforcement city was naturally the most important place. It could be said that there were many masters in it. There was a tyrannical aura in the sky all year round to deter opponents from acting rashly. Although it was just a city, it was the headquarters of the law enforcement hall. There were all kinds of spaces in it. Ordinary people couldn't see them at all. They could only enter and exit them by special methods. The law enforcement prison itself was a special space that didn't exist in the main plane. Only in this way was it the safest. Even if some people wanted to break into the prison, they couldn't find a place to enter. Moreover, there were many experts of the celestial realm in the law enforcement city. The law enforcement prison was a place where numerous felons of the Yi family were imprisoned, so it could be regarded as an impregnable fortress. At this time, the law enforcement city was very lively. Countless masters went in and out. As it was the Yi clan's ancestral worship ceremony, many masters in the law enforcement city had to rush to the Yi clan to be responsible for the safety of the Yi clan. The law enforcement hall and the dark hall worked together to suppress all unstable factors. The Yi clan's ancestral worship ceremony was only held once every 100 years. If such an important day was disrupted, the Yi clan's face would be lost to the entire ancient Barrens continent. At this time, everyone in the Yi clan had to work together to maintain stability. The task of the law enforcement hall, which was in charge of the laws, was several times heavier than usual. Because the law enforcement hall was in charge of the laws on the surface, many trivial matters needed to be handled by the law enforcement hall. The dark hall, on the other hand, only appeared in the dark to clean up some unstable factors. They were responsible for a different direction. Fortunately, Yi Shiwen was already a silver disciple. He did not need to care about those things. Otherwise, he would be annoyed to death. After Yi Shiwen arrived at the law enforcement city, someone was waiting for him at the side. He guided him to the law enforcement prison. It was an elder of the law enforcement hall. His aura was restrained and solemn. He only took a glance at Yi Shiwen. "You are Yi Shiwen?" Although Yi Shiwen had a great reputation now, it was normal for the old antiques who were in charge of the law enforcement city all year round to not know him. These people might not leave the law enforcement city for thousands of years. The rise of the younger generation was meaningless to them. They might have seen too much in their lifetime. They might even be one of them in the past. They didn't care about supervising the rising and falling of the clouds. "Yes." Yi Shiwen nodded. "Follow me." The elder turned around and walked towards the depths of the law enforcement city. Many experts of the law enforcement city made way for him when they saw the elder. "Follow me. Don't take a wrong step." The law enforcement prison is the most important place in the law enforcement city. There are traps and arrays at every step. If you take a wrong step, you might be killed by the arrays. "No one can save you by then," said the elder faintly. "In." Yi Shiwen nodded. He would not show off at this time. The law enforcement prison was located in the depths of the law enforcement city. The space gate was also arranged there. Compared to other places, the law enforcement prison was the most important place. Yi Shiwen saw a huge gate standing in the void from afar. It was empty and there was nothing. However, Yi Shiwen knew that this was the gate to the law enforcement prison. They had just entered the boundary of the law enforcement heavenly prison. They hadn't even reached the gate yet. Suddenly, they felt countless tyrannical gazes falling on them. However, they only glanced at them for a moment and quickly retracted their gazes. Rumble! There was a rumbling sound in front of them as the huge door slowly opened. A figure leapt out from within. It was a young man wearing a luxurious robe and a feather crown. He had an arrogant expression and a sharp aura. It was obvious that he had just come out of the Enforcer Heavenly Prison. Yi Shiwen walked slowly towards the gate under the guidance of the elder. When the three of them passed by, the young man suddenly said, "Wait a minute. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.